you ever speak to me like that again, you better be wearing a cup.
Baby steps.
One break, I'm in
Okay, friends, let's everybody take your positions, please. Here we go. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, rolling. Dave!
And
Dave!
Unchained.
welcome to Dave and Dave Unchained, a Van Halen podcast. I'm Dave.
And I'm Dave.
And we are at episode 74, Dave. We are in February of 2022, and let me be the first to wish you a happy birthday.
Why, thank you, sir, and same to you.
That's right. This is the time of year where you get to be an older man for 3 days before me, which I enjoy all the time. That's right.
I know you love milking those 3 days as much as.
72 hours of pure bliss, and I enjoy it every year, but let's be honest, it goes away quickly because as the 17th rolls around, I realize I'm just as old as you.
Yep, and this year we're the same age as number of weeks in the year.
That's right. Exactly. It's pretty crazy. Well, considering that at the age of 26, Dave, let's see, that was like half, I guess, our age, right?
That will be half our age by the time this broadcast.
That's right.
Yes.
What was going on when we were 26? Van Halen was going through a crisis in 1996, if you remember that. That was the turbulent year of Van Halen when Sammy was in the band and Sammy wasn't in the band, and then Mitch thought he was in the band and Dave thought he was in the band and Gary ended up in the band. What a crazy year 1996 was when we were 26. That was our midlife crisis. And I don't know where we're at now, so we might as well just launch into Van Halen news.
Van Halen.
News! Well, believe it or not, Dave, the top of Van Halen news is not even a member of Van Halen, but Valerie Bertinelli. As we all know, her book, Enough Already, which is her third book, and it topped the bestsellers charts, Dave. Came in at number 1, and with all the publicity she's been doing and talking about Ed and her relationship, it seems to have whipped up a media storm. What do you think of it?
Wow, well, I guess it worked. She made the bestsellers list. Again?
Again. So that's like her third bestseller. Losing It was her first one. Finding It was the second one. The third one is Enough Already. Now, we're on to book number 3. Actually, she's had other books. I shouldn't say that. She had the cookbooks. She had Valerie's Home Cooking and stuff like that. So she's more than three. But just wanted to give you a bit of a breakdown of the book, because everybody's wondering, okay, there's this book, she's talking a lot about Ed, how much is Ed in the book, blah, blah, blah. Originally, Dave had said, I think it's a chapter. Well, I did a full breakdown of the book. The book is 243 pages. Ed is on 100 of them. So,
okay, it's a decent amount.
Yeah. And he is really sort of the running thread through the book. I'm going to say he's sort of a touchstone. He's very much in the beginning, all throughout the middle, and very much in the end. And, she's basically talking about her relationship with Ed and how it has evolved over the years. Now, in the book, she has, I'm going to say, 38 pictures. And out of the 38 pictures, 14 are with Ed. Which I thought that was a lot. You know what I mean? I thought that is kind of extensive. So I broke it all down here. I want to give you a bit of a rundown as to what's going on here. It starts off like around October 2019. And she calls Ed her ex-husband and friend. And Ed drops by for like a quick visit. This is October 2019. So this is before his real downward spiral health-wise. And he comes in to visit Val, and Wolf is there, and they're eating crab dip, this, like, I think it's a spinach crab dip that she made or something like that. And Ed comes in and he tastes it and he's like all excited about it. And it's funny because he doesn't really like to eat. Ed is not a big consumption guy. He's not a big food guy, but when he does like something, he really gets into it. And he was really into this dip, and she kind of talks about it, and she said it was nice to see him eat with gusto, and he looked good, and she said that they stopped living together in 2002, and they divorced in 2007. She said, both of us remarried, but in our own way, we stayed together. We have shared 4 decades of love, anger, frustration, friendship. That is what has endured, the love. And she said that he was diagnosed with cancer back in 2000, with a tongue cancer at that time, and he dealt with it ever since. So Eddie, up into his death, had been dealing with cancer for 20 solid years, which is pretty intense. She said at 64 years old, he's devilishly cute. So there's all these little comments. It's really interesting, and, I'm going to let you guys make your own assessment from it, but I'm just going to give you, some of the things she says here. And she goes into the history of their relationship. They met backstage at a Van Halen concert, how her brother got VIP passes. She said the attraction was instantaneous and mutual. Our connection was deep right from the start. He was adorable, introverted, and possessed with a vulnerability as prestigious as his talent. She said it was interesting to see him eat because he only ate to keep going. He wasn't like a real eater, she said. He was shy, and I was loud, and we all got along very well when he wasn't drinking or using drugs. And I'm convinced we would have stayed together if not for some crazy cliche 80s style behavior. So right from the start, she's getting right into it. So you're like, oh, okay. Then she said that her split with him was hard and complicated. And she said, while we very often live very different lives in the 10 years after Wolf was born, we never lived them separately. Wolf kept us together. Said after we split, an ironic thing happened. Ed and I grew even closer. We couldn't live without each other, but we found it impossible to live completely apart. I won't say we wrote our own happy ending. It was more like a to be continued. So she's really playing it up. I mean, this is her word. She said, Ed looks good. I'm inclined to put my arm around him and give him a friendly, affectionate squeeze, but that's often typical of me. She said his second marriage is basically over, as he confided a while ago, and also with the fact that my own second marriage is in trouble, which I haven't told anyone. I mean, she's saying this straight out in the book, which is really, I don't even know what to think about that, because, first of all, this person, meaning Ed, is not here. So, does he really want all this out there? I have no idea, but it's a little odd. It's very, very frank. She's incredibly frank. And then she says, these are 2 unrelated situations, and there is no chance we are going to get back together. But I do know that if one of us were to open up, the other one would too, and I don't want to get into that. Not here, not now. So she sets the entire table for this lifelong romance. She makes comments about he's cute and all these different things, and she's giving him a squeeze, and he looks good, and all these things. His marriage is falling apart, my marriage is falling, but I don't want to get into it. It's the whole book she's getting into it. So, this is crazy.
So she says she doesn't want to get into it, but it sounds like she's gotten into it pretty deep in the beginning of the book.
This is literally like reading someone's diary. It has that sort of feel like, I've never read someone's diary, but I would imagine someone who's journaling, blogging to themselves. It's like really, really personal. And the thing is it's not just her and Ed. It's like other people involved, like Tom and Janie and Wolf and Ed, who's not here to speak for himself. She said, I simply wish I was more comfortable letting him know how much I love him. I have to say, this whole book, it's almost like she's staking claim with him. It's very, very interesting. She said Wolf used to visit Ed 2-3 times a day, and sometimes I'd spend the night. She was talking about when he wasn't well. From the moment I got pregnant, Ed dreamed of playing with the baby growing inside me. I had never seen him smile so much. he was playing alongside with his brother and his son. He was talking about when Wolf was in Van Halen, that Ed was beyond elated, that he was between his brother and his son, and my God, he was so happy. He didn't even care that David Lee Roth was on vocals. So, and she said she offered to make him, this is like at Thanksgiving time of 2019, his mother's famous dish. His mother was Indonesian. This Indonesian Dutch-style stir-fry called bami, which is B-A-M-I. And she said it's like noodles with pork and veggies. It actually sounds delicious. She said she offered to make it for him from his mom's old recipe. And he spent Thanksgiving with them. And this Thanksgiving in 2019, she gets into real severe detail here. They leave the party and they go to George Lopez's car and they're having private talks in George Lopez's car. And she said at this time, you know, he had his right-hand man, Matt Bruck, was there. And also he had a caregiver named Leon from Germany. She also recounted a time when Ed was drinking and, you know, her father had to knock Ed out with a punch to prevent him from drunk driving. Ed wanted to drive and take a ride, and he was drunk. And in order to stop him, Val's dad, I guess in the moment, did anything he could to stop him, and he cracked Ed's cheekbone, if you could believe that. This is some really personal family stuff here. Said both of us have remarried, Ed in 2009 and me 2 years later. Yet one thing never changed. Every time we saw each other, we made it a point to say, I love you. Now more than ever. Ed talks to her privately. He gives her the gold pendant. We talked about this on the last episode. This gold pendant that he got in Germany when he was getting cancer treatments in George Lopez's car. He says, I hope you don't think it's weird that I bought my ex-wife this gift and I didn't get my wife anything. I just love you. So this is almost like reading like a romance novel. In addition to, there's other stuff in the book. Keep in mind, she's talking about like her Food Network stuff. She has recipes in there. It's sort of like it does have that diary feel, because a diary kind of jumps all over the place according to someone's life, like, you know, different entries. And it's like just kind of an overall thought process. And she says, for nearly an hour, she's talking about that Thanksgiving. For nearly an hour, we sat in the car inches apart and opened our hearts to each other, sharing our feelings about each other from the start of our relationship to the present. He wants me to know that he messed up and that it is too bad. I agree, but acknowledge that I contributed to our troubles too, and I am also sorry. It seems odd to be having this conversation now, but I have a simultaneous sense of why not now. And if not now, we may run out of other nows. We waited long enough to get to this point, which is this. The only thing that matters is love. She said that Ed was crying and he was talking about everything. She said he is very brave, but he's also very scared. And he is just so very, very vulnerable and human. She's talking about him dealing with his cancer. She said, we have forgiven each other for the mistakes we made and the pain we caused each other over the past 40 years. It's a relief and it's freeing. Nothing is left between us but love and Ed's big smile. She keeps talking about his smile. Obviously, he's got a famous smile. So now, she said Ed drank and did drugs as a way of fighting his demons and insecurities. Many times he came off stage angry at some piece of equipment, or he was mad at David Lee Roth, who knew exactly how to get under his skin. So Dave got thrown under the bus. And then she says here, he got sober. He was back to being the kind-hearted soul I fell in love with when I was 20 years old. He is still rough and set in his ways and often a stubborn man, but there is a lightness to him, and it's still there. Wonderful, inviting, irresistible. Happy to be here. Then she flashes to March of 2020. Throughout the book, she talks about the battle with her weight. She said, Ed adored me at any size. I had to split from Ed in May of 2002 and refused to take any money from him. Then she talked about a party. This is creepy, Dave. Sammy had a party at his beach house, and he hired a psychic. And during a reading she had with the psychic, she said he casually said that I was going to die in my early 80s and that Ed was going to pass away in his mid-60s, which is really, really creepy considering Ed died at 65.
Yeah, but is that really a stretch when you know Ed is a rock and roller with a history of drinking?
Yeah.
and smoking.
Yeah, I guess so.
Are you really going out on a limb with that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you got a point there, yeah. But then again, you could say that about Keith Richards and Ozzy, and they keep going, right?
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. But, they are exceptions to the rule.
That is true.
For every one of those guys.
Yeah.
There's another 5 or 10 who didn't make it.
That's true. You're right. She said, Ed and I split 20 years ago. People are always surprised at how close we remain. I, too, sometimes marvel at the affection we still have for each other, considering how much we hurt each other years ago. But we grew up and grew past our problems, and parenthood and the love we have always had for each other proved to be stronger and more resilient than anything else. We chose to remain friends and family and worked at it. This is like a running theme that she really drives home. She mentioned that she went to each other's weddings, and she said, while Ed mentioned that he was likely headed for divorce, I wasn't comfortable pressing him for details. If I had been more inquisitive, I would have gone to his place more frequently these past few months to drop off meals, watch TV, or simply keep him company. It pains me to think he might have been alone or lonely, and I was hesitant about overstepping boundaries even if I was the only one who saw them. Now, she elicits in this book that he was like alone in that house all this time. It's really kind of confusing because you never got that impression because of these pictures with Janie and the dog and Ed.
Right. And he was seeing Wolf all the time.
Yeah.
And he was still busy with the guitar company.
Right.
And, like she spoke about earlier, he had people helping him out, right? He had the driver. He had his brother.
Yeah.
Who was over there regularly jamming with him.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you and I were not there.
No.
But it's just really hard for me to believe that the guy was just sitting there alone all the time. It feels like she's painting this picture that he was there alone all the time.
It is, I know.
Maybe he liked some alone time. There's nothing wrong with solitude, right? He was not like a social butterfly, first of all. So he wasn't going out to parties or seeing people or anything like that. At its most extreme, there's, an image that, this guy is going to die alone. And I don't know. I but find it hard to swallow that.
I know, but here's the other thing. If it wasn't true, she wouldn't lie in front of Wolf. Wolf knows the absolute truth. She's not the type of person to write a book and make all these things up. It's gotta be true because, she has to face her son. And Wolf is a straight arrow. He's no BS kind of guy. And he's very close with his mom. I'm not doubting Valerie because she's a very straight up, honest, frank person. I wouldn't think she would ever paint a picture that wasn't true, but it just seems so strange because of all the tweets and photos and all that stuff. It's odd. It's just really odd. And then she talks about how Ed told her that the cancer spread to his brain and that they discover it after this motorcycle accident he had, which apparently really sent him into a downward spiral. As he shared the details, she said, I noticed that I had draped my arms over his knees. It was something I had done automatically and without any thought as a way of being close. Although when I did notice, I immediately thought, uh-oh, this is kind of intimate, but felt it was appropriate for the situation. She keeps talking about these little things, and I'm just surprised why she would do that. I don't really understand if this is some sort of cathartic thing. Anyway.
No, I think you're right. I think it's two things. I think you hit the nail on the head twice while you've been discussing this. Number one, I think it is cathartic. And number two, I think she is laying her claim to Ed.
If there is one thing that you take away from this book other than, her love of food and her struggle with weight, which is pretty common in today's world, I being no exception, it's the lay claim to Ed. You walk away with that as a glowing neon sign. It's very, very clear. Now, she talks about 5150 a bit here. She said that Ed explained that all the tapes had been numbered and the contents cataloged on a Radio Shack computer that had broken down. Efforts to recover the information all proved unsuccessful. Ed said that he was the only one who could index what was on them, and he shrugged and said he would go through them someday. And I don't know if that day ever came. So that's certainly interesting for Van Halen fans. She also said, I am more upset about the possibility of losing Ed than I was after my parents died. I know that sounds terrible. I love my parents, but my connection to Ed is different. So that's a really strong statement.
That is a strong statement.
That's a very
statement.
heavy statement.
It is. And actually, going back to the statement you said before about losing the hard drive and Ed being the only one who could figure it all out, he said that himself in an interview.
She was referencing that, the one from MTV, the Chris Connolly, I guess his name is, that was there, the one, I think it was around Van Halen 3 time, but yeah, that's the case, but that was a long time ago, so she's wondering, like, did they ever get around to, like, redoing it or something, but I don't think so. She said, when Van Halen was on tour in 2015, I believed Ed was going to beat cancer and be okay. He had battled the disease in various parts of his tongue and throat for a decade and a half, and he had the best medical care available. Early on, of course, he could have helped himself by stop smoking and drinking. She said meeting Ed was a blessing, and she said she had to pry info about Ed's health out of Wolfie, that he was almost like keeping it quiet. And she recalls times Ed would play music outside the bedroom when they were married. In the middle of the night, he would be right outside the bedroom, like playing a song, and that would be a constant thing. She would always, say, can you keep it down? And he would just be like, love you, and continue playing. She also said that in January 2020, Ed was in a hospital. He had a procedure on his back. There's like random thoughts here. She noted that Women in Love was her favorite Van Halen song. She said by October 2020, she discovered that Ed had stage 4 cancer, which is very, very intense. And she said, I wish I had asked more questions. I wish I had called more often. I wish I had just dropped by his house with dinner, but I didn't think it was any of my business. Neither Ed nor I ever had any thoughts about getting back together, but I always knew he had my back, and I knew that I had his. And she said that they would text constantly back and forth, and that in September 2020, Ed had a minor stroke, and that one thing he would always ask for when he was in the hospital was for pizza. He loved pizza. Val and Wolf were in the hospital room like all the time, taking shifts back and forth, and they were telling stories and telling him how much they loved him, and Alan Daney would come in and take shifts as well, and Ed would constantly be listening to Wolf's album on earbuds, and that Think It Over was his favorite track. She said she held his hand and stroked his forehead and said, maybe next time we'll get it right. Day to day, there was like a countdown for his health, and he had another stroke. She said, I love you were the last words he said to Wolf and Val before he stopped breathing. She said when he passed, they all froze in the room. She said that his music will be around forever, that Ed's not going anyplace. She said love always wins, and that's all that's left is love. And then she goes into a trippy moment where she talks about Ed visiting her as a ghost. It really gets a little trippy out there. That's the general gist of what is in there about Ed, and I literally read the whole book, scanning just the Ed parts. Nothing against the rest of the book. It's all fine, and she has a very interesting tone in the way she writes. It's very personal. It's very readable. She writes very well. She's unbelievably candid. I mean, it's like shocking how candid she is. It's almost, like I said, it's almost invasive when you're reading it. There's no weird intimate details or anything like that, but it's intimate in terms of emotion. Just regular intimacy is crazy. But so that was really wild. So what do you make of that, Dave? Was that more than you expected?
It was more than I expected.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not all that surprised from the press I've been reading and hearing. I like the word you use, evasive, because it just feels like, I don't know, she's talking about things that, like, Ed is not around to say yay or nay. And like you said, there's other people involved who may or may not want that stuff out there. And I don't necessarily know that it's her place to start talking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's what was so strange. This is the point. When someone dies, and you've had close people pass to you as well as me, there's a level of respect that you owe that person who's in your life in terms of revealing stuff or, sharing stuff. You don't know if that person wanted any of that stuff out there. And when you're a public person like Ed, and my God, and notoriously private person. So it's a little weird that it's like almost like, hey, by the way, we've been close for years and, we never stop loving each other. And she drives that point home. Two of the funny things that she says in the book is, but this has nothing to do with our marriage. It has no impact on that. And I was like, yeah, how does that work? So there's that, number one. And also when she said, I'm not going to get into it. And it's like, you just wrote a book and 100 pages get into it. Here's another thing that was revealing. So she did this interview on QFM 96 with Torg and Elliot on this radio show. And she's promoting her book. She was reflecting on her relationship she had with Ed. And she says, I pull things apart very, very gently, or at least I try to. She says, there never was a lawyer. We had a mediator. We still lived together. And we finally said we just need to move apart. She said they stayed amicable. And that Ed was very angry with her for a few years, but we had love and respect for one another. Now, when the DJs asked Valerie if Ed's second wife, Janie, was jealous at all, Valerie said, honestly, I don't know. She moved out a few years before Ed died, so he was alone, and I know that she still loved him as well, and she was there the day that Ed died, so they were still trying to stay close and be in each other's life. But yeah, she didn't live there. So I don't know what that is. I really don't. So that is really, really, really strange. Now, just to remind everybody, the things that Janie put out at the time of Ed's passing, she wrote on social media, my husband, my love, my peep, which I guess is her nickname for him. She said, my heart and soul have been shattered into a million pieces. I never knew it was possible to cry so many tears or feel such incredible sadness. Our journey together has not always been an easy one, but in the end and always we have a connection and love that will always be. Saying goodbye is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, so instead I say so long. I will see you again soon in a place with no pain or sorrow. Please watch over Cody and I. Cody's the dog. We love you and miss you very much. Love, your Poopy. I guess that's her nickname. And I remember her writing these things. So, what do you believe, right? It's the strangest thing. I don't know what to say. And she has been everywhere. No wonder the book's on the top of the bestsellers list. She has been everywhere really promoting the hell out of this book. And this has been the main talking point. There's no way around it. It is the absolute main talking point. So I don't know what to say. It's really odd. You know what I really wonder is, how does Wolf feel about all this? He's a quiet, private guy. Alex is a quiet, private guy. Ed was a quiet, private guy. These guys, they don't even want to talk about live tapes, let alone their personal information. They won't even talk about what's in the vault. You think you're digging into their underwear drawers. The way you ask these questions, they snap at you. I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's really, really strange, but that is what it is. That's not my own thoughts. That's what's in the book. That's what's going on there. So I guess, Val is having her moment, and she's expressing herself after Ed's passing, and everybody will do that in their own way, and she's certainly making hers known. That's for sure. So, moving on, well, it is the 10th anniversary of A Different Kind of Truth, and Wolfgang Van Halen did a track-by-track breakdown of the album with Ultimate Classic Rock. Now, I have to be honest with you. I am shocked that he did this, because he doesn't seem to want to talk about Van Halen at all, which I understand. He's trying to promote his own stuff and be his own man. I get it. But he did do this, and I thought it was really cool that he did, because this album is definitely worth celebrating. And he says here, I thought it would be worth looking at some old demos for inspiration, when he's talking about when they were making A Different Kind of Truth, and built upon old ideas to bring out something new. Dad was always writing, so there was always so many ideas up there. And he said that they trolled the vaults for candidates for songs. Wolf said, I don't think people understand how much of an effort it was that we were actually able to record an album. It took us a while, and we worked really hard on it. It was a fun experience and a fun experiment that I think we were grateful to be able to pull off. It was pretty crazy. I'm proud of what I put into it and what we were able to achieve. And I couldn't agree with him more. I don't think people realize, first of all, the quality of this album. Second of all, what went into this album. So he breaks down each track here, and I'm going to give you just a little taste of what he talked about. In regards to Tattoo, very interesting. He says here, this is Wolf's words, that was a song I didn't think should be at the beginning or the first single released. It was a great song, he said, and I think Dave's lyrics were super quirky. He says, but as an opener and a first single, I wasn't into it. I fought for She's the Woman to be the first single. Now, I have to say something about Wolf. He may be a young man, but he certainly has the right instincts for this band. I mean, this is the guy that got this album done. I'm telling you right now, we've said it before, and we'll say it again. A Different Kind of Truth would never happen without Wolf. Wolf was a driving force behind this album, driving force behind the reunion tour, getting Roth back in the band. He is the unsung hero of that last era of Van Halen. He also said it was a little, in terms of Tattoo, it was a little different in comparison to the rest of the album. People are so cynical and reactive these days with social media that I think when they get that song, it's their first impression, and they think the rest of the album's going to be like that, and that wasn't the case. I cannot underscore that even more. He is 100% right with that. I love Tattoo. I happen to love that song, and I know people don't like it or they have issues with it. I agree with him. It should not have been the first single. That first single should have tasted as sweet as Van Halen's flavor, like a Panama, like an Unchained, and She's the Woman has that very distinct Van Halen flavor. Don't get me wrong. I love every song on that album. I really, really do. I totally believe that. But I have to say, if you're marketing, you gotta go with She's the Woman. It is a slammin' rock track. It just sounds like Van Halen.
It does sound like Van Halen.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to appeal to fans of that classic sound, that's definitely the song you go with.
Yeah. And you get one shot these days. It's not like back in the 80s. You know, back in the 80s when Dave and I were young men, you look at some of the biggest albums, Dave. Def Leppard's Hysteria. They came out with a single, Women. It didn't hit. It took until a while until that album got going. Same thing with Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. That album did not pick up until a year after it was released because record companies back in the day used to work albums with singles and videos, and they would build campaigns. That does not happen anymore. You get one shot, and that's it.
Yeah, and I feel like with Tattoo, they were trying to appeal not to the Van Halen fans.
The wider,
to,
Yes,
to as many people as they could. And that's why they went with that one.
I know, but you know what? I tell you, who are the people that are going to buy that album?
I hear you. I agree with you. If you really want to light a fire under all the people who've been waiting for that album, you go with She's the Woman.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree. But I felt like they were trying to appeal to a broader dynamic.
You're right. You're 100% right.
I think the song charted somewhere on some chart for like a week or two. So, yeah, it wasn't until the other songs started coming out that fans were like, the single's the worst one. But, you know, how many people are really going to go that far if they hear the first song and they're like, yeah, it's all right, but man.
So then he said, with She's the Woman, he said it was the most classic, straight from the demo era that he got. He picked it up, and he said that song was really epitomized the classic era Van Halen party rock sort of vibe. I was really, really happy that we did that song. Now, in terms of You and Your Blues, he said it was more melodic side of pop that you saw in the Hagar era, but with Dave on vocals, which is an interesting assessment. He said Dave, for the longest time, didn't let us sing the background vocals on the album. I think it was just an opinion. He wanted to do it himself, and I disagree with that because I think one of the biggest parts of Van Halen are the backing vocals. I think there was a couple of songs we went back in and said, fuck it, we're going to do this, and it's part of it. He can't stop us. And Dad and I went in on the chorus, and I don't know if we ever played it live, but we did rehearse it. Now, they did not play that song live, not that I'm aware of. You and Your Blues, I happen to really like that song. In Chinatown, he says, probably my favorite song to play from this album. he said that people were saying that Ed must be using an octave pedal on the intro, but he says no. It was him putting a capo on his bass, and he's tapping. So he said no one believed it until we played it live. He said it was very aggressive, fun song, and I think of all the songs on the album, Dad and Al are really firing on all cylinders on that one, and I think the end is just hilarious because then Dad starts soloing like crazy. And if you listen to the end of it, it's just a cacophony of tapping and funny noises. In regards to Blood and Fire, he says, I think musically it's one of the best songs Dad ever wrote. Dad's melodic phrasing on that song is so picture-perfect 1984 era, you can still hear that. And he says it reminded him of the Balance era stuff. In fact, he said it almost reminded him of Belucatherium in a way. I think we played it a couple of times, but we didn't play it enough. And it was tough to sing and play live, he noted. Now, in terms of Bullethead, he said Bullethead was one of the first three that they got together. Was She's the Woman, Bullethead, and Out of Space. Those were the three songs, which was originally Let's Get Rockin'. He said the song Bullethead was kind of to prove it to ourselves that we could repurpose and build upon the old ideas to bring out something new. And he thought Bullethead had sort of a straight-up punk vibe to it, which I totally agree with. Now, in terms of As Is, he says people would recognize the main idea from when Dad was on 2.5 Men, and he called that idea 2 burritos and a root beer float. He does this at the beginning of As Is riff. It just shows you how long his ideas have been kicking around. He said, I had a really good time with this one because in the ride out with Dad, I do this thing together where we're like descending, tapping kind of thing, and it's really fun between the riff. He really enjoyed this. Now, this is a funny comment. So on Honey Baby Sweetie Doll, he said, easily the most ridiculous name for a song. When I heard it, I was like, okay, that's Dave. And he laughed, and he said the original title for it was like Flex or something. And he said it was because at the very beginning, there was just some weird scratching sounds that sounded like metal breaking. He said that was actually him. A lot of the people think that's a guitar, but the only guitar you hear at the beginning of that is kind of a high-pitched beeping that Eddie was messing with, and like an octave pedal with a delay, and there was a scratching in here, which was Wolf. And then he said Dave added like some sort of Russian walkie-talkie on there. He says Dave's dog barks in the middle of the song, and he said he really loved Dave's dog. He said it was a sweet dog. And he says you never expected to hear a song like that from Van Halen. It was just a real heavy, evil-sounding song, and it was really fun, one that they would play all the time. They didn't play that live, but I guess maybe in rehearsal he's talking about. Now, in terms of Trouble with Never, he says it's a riff that Eddie wrote to warm up to. And he says he would call it da-da-da-da-da because that's the intro. And that was sort of a joke between them. And he says that's another one where it's kind of a different style. It's funkier. He says there's a little different fun bass parts on it. In terms of Out of Space, he says lyrically it's all Dave. He says, but much of the song is unchanged from the original demo, which is Let's Get Rockin'. He says he updated the bass riff of it to make it his own, but he has a really active bass part on there. In terms of Stay Frosty, he said it was a brand new track that was all Dave. It was his original song, but he was the one, Wolf, added structure to it. And he thought, what if we treated it as sort of an Ice Cream Man? He said it's almost like Ice Cream Man Part 2 in a way. It sort of has that vibe we were going for in the studio. And he says that Ed, Al, and him were all in the studio during the day recording stuff, and that Dave would come in later and do vocals by himself. But on this particular song, they were all four of them in the studio together, like old school times. So that's why you get that really cool vibe in there. On Big River, he said it was pretty similar to the original demo, which is Big Trouble, but he thought it was funny that Dave changed the lyric from Big Trouble to Big River, but he said it transferred pretty easily. And Beats Workin', he said, was a fitting finale, he felt, as the last song on the last album. He said it almost harkened back to the era of sort of a funky sort of 70s groove. He says, I dig how the melodic and chord bass riff there in the bridge where it's just by itself and Alex is hitting the cowbell. He said it's just a fun song to play, and then Ed goes into this solo, and that's one of his favorite moments on the album for sure. But he said being that it's the very last song on the very last album, it has this feeling of finality to it that you could almost hear in the track. So I thought that was a really cool, insightful breakdown from Wolf. Dave, what do you think?
I did. I loved it. He really gave some nice details that we hadn't heard before on the album. And like you mentioned, it was almost kind of surprising considering how he's really forging ahead with his solo career. Thank you for summarizing the whole thing. Because Wolf, obviously he was there. He's got the inside track, and it was really nice of him to clarify which songs were new and which ones weren't. So a great read. Every once in a while, he'll talk about Van Halen, and I can't get enough of that.
I think he's very proud of that album. I think he worked very hard on that album. I know he played a really strong role in arranging songs and really working on it. He didn't just play bass and sing some background vocals on that album. He was knee-deep into it, so that's for sure. He also did another interview with Classic Rock. He just did a regular interview about his solo career. He talked about Elvis Biscuit, who he called really the other half of Mammoth. He said that he's a reflector that I throw all my ideas at to bounce back at me. He also said that his favorite tracks on the album are Stone, and also the song that he feels defines the band's sound is Epiphany. Now, Epiphany is his new single that he just put out, and that is the song he's been wrapping up his shows with, ending with. It has a new black and white video that's really cool. It shows sort of some road shots. It's got backstage and sound checks shots as well as crowd shots. There's even a cool rollout of a Van Halen road case where you see the logo on there. Very often, you'll see little clips of little Van Halen snippets in there of the logo on the equipment. It's very similar to the Bon Jovi video, Wanted Dead or Alive, which was a grainy black and white video showing life on the road, loading in, loading out, setting up, sound checking, getting ready for the show, playing the show, packing up after the show, traveling, that kind of thing. It shows Wolf on keyboard, and the interesting part is the video goes color about midway through and then ends with a collective bow of all the band members, which is kind of cool. In the interview, he also talked about that his favorite singers are Lane Staley from Alice in Chains as well as Maynard Keenan from Tool. He says they love their voices, but he also loves the background harmonies of Blink-182, where Mark Hoppus and Tom DeLonge used to blend together, and that's a real inspiration for him. And he called his last name both a blessing and a curse. Blessing because it gives him the opportunities to open doors, but he also said you have to have the goods to back it up. You're not going to be there for too long if, just have the last name and you're not backing up. But we all know he certainly has the talent to support his last name. He says in terms of school, he only really got good marks in his other classes. Acting, he was really good at, and astronomy, and that AC/DC, as he has mentioned before, is one of his all-time favorite bands, and his ideal drumming gig would be play drums for Nine Inch Nails, which I thought was surprising. He also said his favorite day off is just lounging around on the couch with his girlfriend, watching TV, playing video games, and that the guitarist Frank Sidoris from Mammoth, him and Frank carry around their different home component systems around from hotel to hotel, and they play video games all the time. And that his goal is to take Mammoth to the next level. So this kid's definitely got some real focus on this band. He's really driving hard. What do you think, Dave?
I think he can do it.
Yeah, I definitely think he can do it. He's done a lot already. Now, speaking of doing it, Mammoth WVH is nominated for 2 awards. In addition to the Grammy Award, we know it's coming up in April, right? See if he takes out the Foo Fighters and Paul McCartney. That'd be incredible. But he is up for the iHeart Music Awards, which is going to take place at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles on Tuesday, March 22nd on Fox. Now, he's up for Best Rock Artist of the Year, and he's against the Foo Fighters, Chevelle, Five Finger Death Punch, and The Pretty Reckless. So he's got some tight competition there. Best New Rock Artist. All Good Things, Architects, Aaron Jones, 936, and Mammoth. So I think he's got a good shot at that Best New Rock Artist. So hopefully we see what happens with Young Wolf. But lots going on with him. What do you think?
Young Wolf. Dude, he's 30.
Hey, we're 52. He's Young Wolf. Anyway, As we all know, on the last episode, we celebrated Eddie's 67th birthday. Now, a lot of people from his inner circle reached out on social media, and one of the most important ones was Alex, because we don't hear from Alex Van Halen very often, but he did put out a message on social media and said, "Hey Ed, happy birthday. May your light never dim. Love you, miss you, and by the way, Wolf's killing it." Now, Wolf himself put out a picture of the two of them from 1995 saying, "Happy birthday, Pop. I love and miss you more than you could ever know." It was very sweet. Sam put out a birthday message. "Happy birthday, my dear friend. I sure do miss you. Thank God we still and always will have the music to celebrate. On this day, 24 hours of Van Halen is in order." Michael Anthony wrote, "Happy birthday, Ed. I miss you, brother. You were such a huge part of my life. I will always celebrate and wave the Van Halen flag high." Even Cody Van Halen, his Pomeranian, put out a tweet, said, "Happy birthday, Daddy. We love you and miss you so much." Journey's Neil Shun, guitarist, said, "Happy birthday, buddy." Put up a picture of Ed. Valerie put up a very intimate picture of Ed in a bathing suit, looking very young and coming out of the pool there. And nothing from Mr. Roth, Dave. He's been nothing but quiet. Just putting up paintings left and right. Not much to mention from Roth. Right now, there's this crazy thing I want to mention to you in regards to Ed. This really knocked me for a goddamn loop, Dave. So I'm on the internet, and I came across this Eddie Van Halen handmade guitar pick. They call it the Holy Grail. There's a letter of authenticity that comes with this, and it's a handmade guitar pick. And it's got like his teeth marks in it, and it was apparently used during the 90s and early 2000s. It's a one-of-a-kind piece of music history from this guitarist, and it was gifted to Tracy L. Hansen, who is a previous girlfriend of Eddie's. And I guess he gave it to her in August of 2006. Very often, Eddie would put it in his mouth and use it, and he said it was partially to blame for giving him cancer and putting it in his mouth all the time. It's kind of like gold, and it's got these holes in it. It's a really odd-looking thing. Guess how much it's going for, Dave? Take a guess.
Oh, isn't it like tens of thousands of dollars?
It's $31,287.51. It's crazy.
It is.
And
that's a big pick. That's a thick
pick.
Right?
It looks,
that's crazy.
It looks like it's something someone would hand make in metal shop. Like it has that sort of vibe to it. Yeah. So that's going on. More tributes to Ed. So Shiprock, which was a cruise that featured an all-star tribute to Eddie Van Halen with former Guns N' Roses guitarist Ron Bumblefoot Thiel and the singer Michael Starr from Steel Panther, who we all know as Ralph Sands from the Atomic Punks, Alice Cooper's guitarist Nita Strauss, and former Five Finger Death Punch lead guitarist Jason Hook. They all joined an all-star band to perform 9 VH classics. They did Jump and Hot for Teacher, You're No Good, Pound Cake, Ice Cream Man, Right Now, Why Can't This Be Love, Unchained, and Panama. The entire set is uploaded on YouTube. If you guys want to check it out, it's Shiprock 2022. The cruise, it set sail from Galveston, Texas on January 22nd. Made stops in Costa Mesa and Cozumel, Mexico, before returning on January 27th. So that's obviously going on. And there's even more tributes to Ed because they're at the Whiskey A Go-Go, where the band used to play back in the day. They had an ultimate jam night on February 1st in honor of Eddie Van Halen in West Hollywood, California at the Whiskey A Go-Go. Again, Michael Starr from Steel Panther. Also, Mark Torin of the Bullet Boys was there, along with several David Lee Roth's former bandmates like Jamie Hunting and Jake Fawn and Frank Lindia, and ex-Megadeth member Jeff Young, Matt Starr from Ace Frehley's band, Ira Black from Gods and Monsters, and it was hosted by Paulie Z, frontman of The Sweet, and they did all kinds of cool Van Halen songs. So that was that ultimate jam night at the Whiskey A Go-Go. What do you make of all these tributes to Ed?
I love it. It's very grassroots, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Because there's not going to be any big tribute anytime soon.
Yeah, that's true.
Now that people can go out again, it's nice to see people putting stuff together.
Absolutely. Because I don't think we're going to see more than that, so we have to do it all ourselves.
Right.
So now, as we last had a Van Halen news, I kind of had to add it late that Sam announced a tour with George Thorogood He's doing a 14-date tour that's sort of an interesting tour. It's sort of beginning of summer, end of summer tour. So it's sort of strange. He's doing 5 dates in June, and he's kicking off at Bridgeport, Connecticut, and he's going to go to Homedale, New Jersey, Mansfield, Massachusetts, Noblesville, Indiana, Cuyahoga Falls in Ohio, and then he's taking a break for 2 whole months. Then he's going back on tour at the end of August, where he's going to Michigan, he's going to Ohio again, and he's going to Missouri, and he's going to Illinois and Utah, Arizona, California, Oregon, and he's ending in Irvine, California in September. So George Thorogood, a very interesting pairing, and Sammy says a tour this size has been a long time coming, and it's definitely going to be worth the wait. The Circle and I are super excited and ready to throw the party of the year with George Thorogood. We're going to take the music and party to a whole new level. Crazy Times is an understatement. Apparently the album is called either Crazy Times or These Crazy Times. I don't know what they're going to settle on. It's produced by Dave Cobb. I'm assuming if the first date is June 10th, that we're probably going to get the album before that, right, Dave? You think somewhere around May?
I would like to think so, but I don't know.
How do you go on tour without releasing the album? That's ridiculous.
Well, Dave, these are ridiculous times.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
I seem to have read that, he was shooting for it to come out before the end of this year. So I really don't know. I agree with you logically, but, who the hell knows?
Well, we know. Here's the thing. The album's done. And Sammy's a businessman. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to sell the album, you put it out before the tour. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, And he's old school, He's not going to tour and then release the album afterwards. I mean, that's stupid.
I hear you, but who the hell knows? But anyway, once again, I'm happy that Sam's going to be releasing new music. So
that's
super
for
psyched
sure.
about that.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Now, speaking of Sam, our friend Midwest Ron tipped us off on this. This came from the June-July issue of Rock Candy Magazine from Malcolm Dome. And he said, here's a quote from Sam. They asked him, believe it or not, Dave, you're going to get a kick out of this. Is there any chance of a Hagar, Sean, Aronson, Sharif reunion? An HSAS, Hassas, as Dave likes to call it. Is there any chance of that reunion? He says, not right now, because I have other priorities. First, I want to do another Chickenfoot album. Once that's done, then next on my list is an album from The Circle. Once those are done, we've toured the shit out of them, then it's possible a second Hassas album could be discussed. But it would need all 4 of us to be into the idea, and that's a very long shot. I wouldn't rule anything out, though. One thing I've noticed is that there is a real fan base for the album. It may have not sold a lot of copies, but I come across a lot of people who bought Through the Fire and absolutely love it. They think it's one of the best records of my career. Those who like Hassas are fanatical in their devotion. So for their sake, I don't want to mess up their dreams that one day we'll reform and do an album. So let's leave the door open, at least ajar, for that to happen. So that's shocking, but even more shocking is saying he wants to do another Chickenfoot album.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm like, oh, now he wants to do another Chickenfoot album?
I know.
Come on.
First of all, that's a long shot because Joe Satriani is going to be releasing a new solo album called The Elephants of Mars on April 8th.
Love his album titles.
I know, he's out there all the time. This is going to be his 19th studio album. His first single is Sahara, and here's a clip. I've heard really good things about this album. The album's first video was directed by ZZ Satriani, which is his son. So that should be coming out, and there's a whole track list. He's got 14 tracks: Sahara, The Elephants of Mars, Faceless, Bluefoot Groovy, Tension and Release, Sailing the Seas of Ganymede, Doors of Perception, East 104th Street, New York City, Pumpin', Dancin' of the Spores, Night Scene, Through a Mother's Day Darkly, 22 Memory Lane, and Desolations. Long track listing. It sounds like a great album. I'm really excited about this. And the Chili Peppers are releasing an album and going on tour. So when the hell does he think this Chickenfoot album is going to happen?
I think he's just talking out of his ass just to answer the question.
I think so. I think he better start getting Hassas together. That's what I think. He's got a better shot at Hassas. You better Hassas it up. So anyway, so now in promoting his Vegas residency at the Strat, he talked to the San Diego Union Tribune, and he was doing a very jolly interview. He was in a really good mood here. This is Sam, and he said that in terms of guitars, they said he prefers a Gibson Les Paul. He says, I can't play a Fender. He says, Vic, my lead guitarist, plays a Fender. He says, for me, playing a Strat is like wrestling a professional wrestler. I was raised on Gibson guitars, and my hands feel right when I'm playing one. He said that about this Vegas residency, that they have 140 songs at the ready, Dave. He says they're doing 20 songs a night, and they're switching it up from night to night. He says one night they're doing the whole Montrose first album, another night they're doing a dozen Van Hagar songs, and then he said they're adding in 2 to 3 new Circle songs from Crazy Times album, and he says they're really, really pushing themselves in Vegas, because he says, I love mixing it up. He said that he never thought he'd be playing Vegas, but he's 74, and he says, yeah, now my fans are old enough to play Vegas, and I'm old enough. And he says it's become a really cool, hip place now to do gigs, and he's beyond excited about this residency. And he said that he was so excited, beyond excited, about getting that honorary tourism ambassador of Los Cabos and Los Cabos Medal of Honor. He said, that is the epitome of the dream I never dreamed. The ceremony was mind-blowing. I cried and my wife cried. He said they had a military band and a full ceremony with the governor and the mayor and the secretary of the state. And he said, I nudged my wife, Kari, and said, honey, am I dreaming? Is this really for me? He said, it was one of the things I am most proud of in my life. So I was really shocked to hear that. When they asked him about extra Van Halen songs, they said, is there anything left over, unreleased stuff that could come out? He says, Van Halen did not have many songs that were completed that didn't come out. Maybe there's some stuff we could add background vocals to, or that I could write some new lyrics for, but I'm leery about doing that because the legacy of Van Halen is so great, and prior to me joining the band, the legacy is pure greatness. Eddie's guitar work, the band's playing the songs. He says, anything left over wasn't good enough to be on those records. I don't care what anyone says. Putting out unreleased music wouldn't do anything other than put some money in somebody else's pocket. He says, I know Eddie had a ton of unreleased jams that he had made cassettes of because that's how he wrote songs. So he said maybe, but who knows what they could put together. But he says right now he's feeling good. He says, I'm healthy. I do 50 push-ups and 100 crunches each morning. I walk 4 to 5 miles a day. And I don't run anymore because my knees are beat up from jumping off stages with my guitar. He says, I still sing every song I wrote. I put them in lower keys now and tune them down a whole step, if not a half step. But he says, I'm touring. He goes, I don't need money. He says, it's not my motivation. I'm just motivated for doing cool things that excite me, and music still does that. If I couldn't sing well, I would not do that to my fans. I will not embarrass myself, my fans, or my family, but right now, I'm strong as a horse. So Sam at 74, Dave, just kicking ass, left and right. What do you make of that?
Go Sam.
Yep.
Go Sam.
He's unbelievable, this guy. So now, I got some bad news for Mr. David Lee Roth. So, Ink, the original, is now Ink no more, because Ink the original has closed up shop. They posted something up on social media. It said, first, our favorite restaurant, the corner bookstore, now us. What a long, great trip it's been. Ink, the original. And it just had a watercolor painting that Dave did as a backdrop. So, not long after the start of this company, Dave, it is over. What the hell do you make of that?
Yeah, that's pretty sad because I think Dave invested a lot of his own money into the company, too.
I think he said something like $7 million.
I think you're right. I mean, sorry to see it go and it didn't take off. I mean, it sounded like a good premise. but apparently there was other competition besides him for that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
no, I guess it just didn't work out.
That's true. So now, a little controversy, Dave. So, as you know, I'm a big John Mellencamp fan. And John Mellencamp released a new album, and it's called Strictly a One-Eyed Jack. Now, on this album, he does 3 collaborations with Bruce Springsteen, which, by the way, are the 3 best songs on the album. Not a surprise. And one of the songs is called Did You Say Such a Thing? And a lot of people are clamoring online that this song is ripping off Finish What You Started. So here's a clip of the John Mellencamp Bruce Springsteen collaboration, Did You Say Such a Thing? Now here's a clip of Van Halen's Finish What You Started from 1988's OU812. Now, listen, I think that there is a similar guitar tone here, and it's definitely a similarly structured song in that it's very stripped down. But the song itself, the melody of the song is totally different, but it sounds like the same exact guitar. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the same tone, the same guitar, the same style, the same recording. It almost sounds like it's being played right from the same session. That's how close it sounds in terms of, I think that's what everybody's hearing, but the song is a bit different. What do you think, Dave?
No, I agree. It's definitely a similar song in style. And I like the way you put it. It's like, you know, the musicians from the one session did the song and then they did the next
that's
song,
what it sounds
right?
like. I mean,
yeah, but that's where the similarities end. I don't think they're the same song.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are pissed. But anyway, that's that. You can take of it what you want. I don't think there's going to be any lawsuits, though, that's for sure. I don't think they have enough to go on there. But, there's plenty of...
Springsteen and Mellencamp, you don't think they're checking all that stuff out?
Oh, exactly.
So,
Yeah. No one's fooling around. Now, this is interesting. So, one of our listeners, Dave, Johnny Booth, tipped us off about this. I found this very, very funny. So, there's this pizza place in Richmond, Virginia called Hot for Pizza. And the whole place is Van Halen themed. Everything. Hot for Pizza is a takeoff Hot for Teacher. And their tagline is, got it bad, got it bad, got it bad. Now, the interesting thing is the logo is a takeoff. Now, only the real hardcore fans are really going to get this, but it's a takeoff the late 70s chrome circle logo with a space theme that has the old school Van Halen logo with the ribbon floating into place, and it's above the earth is below. Now this one has, instead of the earth, it has like a pizza as the backdrop. Instead of the VH, it has a HP, it has an HFP. Instead of the V, it's got an H. Instead of an H, it's got an FP. You have to see the way it's angled. It evokes the Van Halen logo in chrome, like the original logo. All the items on the menu, there's like appetizer called the Solo from Beat It. There's a pie called Runnin' with the Basil. Get this, Dave. Pesto both worlds. The Yankee Rose is a romaine salad. Everybody wants some. Is an 18-inch thin crust cheese pizza. Drop Dead Legs is the chicken bites that they have. Eruption is the burrata that they sell. And get this is what's even funnier about it, is they have their own merch. They sell a black logo t-shirt, a long sleeve shirt. I can hear Midwest Ron writing this down. He's out to buy about half of them for his cauldron of stuff. Yeah, if anybody wants to check out their website, it's www.hot4pizza. That's HOTFORPIZZA.square.site/. So if you guys want to check that out, it's cool. It's a fun little thing. Obviously, the guys who run it are real Van Halen fans, and they're also at Hot for Pizza RVA@gmail. It's number 4. So the name is called Hot FOR, but the email is the number. So it's HOT number 4 pizza PIZZA RVA@gmail.com. So if you guys want to get some merch, and they're kind of cool looking if you're into that. And
where are they located?
In Richmond, Virginia.
All right.
Yeah, I can believe that. Now, as we all remember, Dave and I interviewed Steve Rosen, the legendary rock journalist Steve Rosen, from back in the day. He used to interview Eddie for all these different magazines, and we talked about at length with Steve about this book that he's writing on Ed. Well, on Ed's birthday, the day we came out with our episode, he announced the name of his book, and that it's available for pre-orders. So the book is called Tone Chaser, TONECHASER, Tone Chaser, Understanding Edward, My 26-Year Journey with Edward Van Halen. It's over 400 pages of Rosen's odyssey of decades interviewing Eddie and being friends with him. And he says here in a quote, "I spent 14 long, hard months writing Tone Chaser. It was both the most difficult story I ever written and the most rewarding. I wanted to be as honest and transparent as I could, which was not always an easy thing to do. In the end, this was the most complete and comprehensive book I could have possibly written. There was nothing left to say when I reached the last page. With every word I wrote, I was reminded of the time I spent with Edward, and that hurt terribly. But it also brought back what a remarkable experience that was, and how insanely lucky I had been to have known him, and astonishingly to have been friends with him. I hope you can feel everything I felt. That was the purpose of the book." Now, if you guys want to order one, pre-sale orders are taking place now. Now, the way this works is, Steve, because he wanted to do the book the way he wanted to do the book, meaning like he wanted kitchen sink, everything in there, right? You know, when you work with an editor and you're a publishing company, they're going to tell you what to take. You can't go past 250 pages, blah, blah, blah. Well, Steve wanted to do it his way. He wanted just to get it all out there in one big tome. No one was going to put out a 400 to 500 page book. Like, that's not heard of. You're not going to get that. Normally it's like 200 pages, and they're not even big pages. So he wanted to do his own thing. He figures if he's going to do it once, he's not doing it twice. So he decided to self-publish. So he's selling this directly. So if you want to buy one, you can PayPal Steve directly at SC Rosen, that's SCROSEN, at SB as in boy, C as in Charles, global.net. So it's SCROSEN at SBCglobal.net. And it's $47 for a book if you're in the United States. That includes the shipping. Now, if you're outside the United States, it's a lot more money. And it's not because he's trying to bilk you. It's because the shipping costs are insane. And he's not fooling around here. I've dealt with this before. I don't know why, but the shipping overseas is out of control. So it's $95 if you want it shipped overseas, which means outside the United States. Email Steve, SCROSEN at SBCglobal.net. And I know a lot of people wanted that information, and we didn't have it the last time we did that interview, but now we have. We wanted to give it to you guys, so check that out. Now, there's some really cool covers of Van Halen songs that came out since the last time we spoke. Number one is a cover of Romeo Delight from Annihilator. Here's a clip.
Special reason must have lied, 'cause I ain't leaving. We're in for a very long night. Heard a vicious rumor from your mama's tongue. You're a desperate woman, need a man with a gun. High crime zone in the city of light. Oh, baby, please. Can't take it anymore. Oh, baby, please.
This is very traditional to the original version, very cool, very aggressive. It fits the band really well. The guitarist, which is Lexi Lahio, I think his name is, absolutely kills Ed's solo. This is from the album called Metal 2. I think Dave Lombardo from Slayer is on drums. That's pretty nice. And now here's another one from a band called Nerd Halen, and they're a Van Halen tribute band. They have a comedic edge to it, and here's a clip called Nerdy Woman, which is a play off of Pretty Woman.
Nerdy woman, walking down the street, nerdy woman, the kind I'd like to meet, nerdy woman. Oh, you look clumsy as you could be. Are you homeschooled just like me? Nerdy.
And as you can tell, there's a lot of humor put in there. There's a little clip at one point where Hal Sparks is the lead singer. He's the actor, Hal Sparks. I think he was originally on Talk Soup from the E! channel. It's really well done. Very, very Van Halen in spirit and sound and humor, too. It's really funny the way he plays it up. So now another one. These were all knockout out of the park covers, by the way. South of Eden took on a real daring one, Drop Dead Legs. Here's a clip.
Drop dead legs, pretty smile, hurts my head. Didn't see you, giant boy, makes me scream. I feel nothing but the shots of you. Nothing else could ever do.
Now, the band totally captures the swagger and wallop of this Van Halen classic from 1984. The band is from Columbus, Ohio. They're formerly known as Black Coffee. What a name for a band. They released this on Ed's birthday. You can check out the band at southofeldenband.com. You have Justin Young on guitar. He nails all the Eddie Van Halen parts, and drummer Nick Fratane really makes it swing. So congratulations to all those bands and really paying tribute to Ed, which I thought was really, really nice. What did you think, Dave?
I haven't heard all the ones you talked about yet,
Right.
but the ones I have, they're pretty good. Like I always say, it's always nice to see new bands paying respect to Van Halen and seeing them still be influential.
Yeah. Now, here's another thing was interesting. So, David Coverdale, if you remember, he's admitting that he stole Steve Vai from David Lee Roth. He says Vai was working with Roth when he was approached by Coverdale. Coverdale, the Whitesnake frontman, said that he stole him, basically, and it was really funny. And apparently, Vai absolutely loved David Coverdale. He says, David was a prince. He had a lot of confidence in me, and he basically knew he needed to just let me do my thing. David knew what I was capable of and really didn't interfere with what I wanted to do. So he felt like, I guess, that Roth really wasn't letting him shine in the band, that I guess by the time they got to the Skyscraper era, Steve was sort of like just part of in the background. And Coverdale stated that he didn't understand why David Lee Roth wasn't using Steve Vai to his full potential and called Vai the wizard of the instrument. He says, we stole him from the David Lee Roth band, so we just gave him an opportunity to shine and turn up his guitar and play. We never understood why David would have such a wizard of the instrument in his band and not really utilize it. So now he shines in Whitesnake. And, he was on the album Slip of the Tongue, which sold over 1 million copies in the United States and went platinum, and it was a top 10 album on the Billboard charts. Interesting part, Dave, I wanted to note that on that tour, when Steve Vai played, and that was the year he released Passion and Warfare, you know that they gave him a special solo section in the show? That he
yeah, he did a couple of songs from the album,
Unbelievable. Right? It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like that before. That is separate from the band like that? Unbelievable. Well, that wraps up Van Halen news.
And that's the way it is. Good night.
And we actually have one little piece of news that I have to tag on here, and I'm going to explain in a minute. But before I get to that, I want to let you know that Dave and I are doing a special for this episode about the 10th anniversary of A Different Kind of Truth. Now, Dave and I did a whole episode focusing on A Different Kind of Truth where we broke down the album and we interviewed producer John Shanks, and we already did that, and that was great. But there's one thing we wanted to do, is we wanted to break down the album in a different way. We wanted to show the seeds of it, because there's a lot of mystery that surrounds that album, and there's a lot of misconception about that album, exactly what it is, and why people call it, oh, it's from old demos. Yeah, there's some seeds from old demos, but we wanted to clarify exactly how many songs, where they're from, how much of the song is new, how much of it is a rehash, all kinds of stuff. So we really break it down, and we do a whole special on the origin of A Different Kind of Truth. So you guys are going to get that in celebration of the 10th anniversary. Then here comes this other piece of news, which I'm going to tack on to our interview. So we did an interview with the ladies from Pasadena for Van Halen, and we spoke to these two ladies who run that organization that has been coming from the city of Pasadena, where they're trying to pay tribute to Eddie Van Halen and the band Van Halen and their Pasadena roots. So Dave and I did an interview with them. In the process of which we were interviewing them, they were trying to get a park named after Eddie, and it was in contention, but right now it seems like, and this is sort of the piece of Van Halen news that I wanted to add here, is that there is some discussion about naming the stage after Eddie in the park, but then when they spoke to the Van Halen family, they really wanted to name the stage the Van Halen stage as opposed to just the Eddie Van Halen stage. So apparently that's going back and forth, and they're going to decide on it and make it official, I guess, coming up next week or so, and they're going to be in touch with us, the girls, to finalize that. But they are working very hard to restore the Van Halen name in the city of Pasadena. They were the ones that got that plaque on the venue in Pasadena. I think it was a civic center. I know they're trying to do a mural, and they're trying to do all different kinds of things in the city to celebrate Van Halen's origin there. So that's all coming up, and we got tons of stuff here. But before that happens, Dave, the mail has been piling up. Now, we let him get away with murder last month. He went light, but now comes the axe, and there's plenty of mail to which we have to get through, and we got to get to that right away, and that's all coming up next. Take a listen.
I sell smiles for a living. You're half one free. That looks good on you. That's what makes me happy. Have another. Wear it for breakfast.
If you need a dose of VH, get a taste of the closest thing. Romeo Delight, the ultimate Van Halen tribute band, playing all the hits from the David Lee Roth era, first classic 6 albums, plus deep cuts, some of which have never been played live before by the band. They even throw in popular tracks from the Sammy Hagar era and solo hits. The most viewed Van Halen tribute band on YouTube, Romeo Delight, doing customized recreations of staging, instruments, and costumes from the classic Van Halen era. They even perform entire Van Halen albums in sequence. Romeo Delight plays theaters, casinos, summer indoor and outdoor festivals, and special events. They're also available for private parties. To contact them, call Bud Blanche at 215-704-5144. That's 215-704-5144. Or via email at sonicparade1@yahoo.com. Romeo Delight, the ultimate Van Halen tribute band.
Pick up the new book, Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen, by Brad Tolinski and Chris Gill. These music journalists share with fans new and old alike a candid, compulsively readable, and definitive oral history of the most influential rock guitarist since Jimi Hendrix. It is based on more than 50 hours of unreleased interviews they recorded with Eddie Van Halen over the years, most of them conducted at the legendary 5150 Studios at Ed's home in Los Angeles. The heart of Eruption is drawn from these intimate and wide-ranging talks, as well as conversations with family, friends, and colleagues. In addition to discussing his greatest triumphs as a groundbreaking musician, including an unprecedented dive into Van Halen's masterpiece 1984, the book also takes an unflinching look at Edward's early struggles as a young Dutch immigrant unable to speak the English language, which resulted in lifelong issues with social anxiety and substance abuse. Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen, also examines his brilliance as an investor who changed the face of guitar manufacturing. Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen. Get your copy today on Amazon.com.
So hey everybody, this is your favorite rock journalist, Stephen Charles Rosen, the legendary one, talking to you from my unbelievable conversation with Dave and Dave Unchained. And I need to tell you one more thing. This Dave guy is one tenacious dude, and he came after me month after month to come on his show, and I'm very happy I did. So rock on, everybody. Rock on, Dave and Dave.
Author Greg Renoff is back with a new book, Ted Templeman, A Platinum Producer's Life and Music. The new biography of the record producer Ted Templeman, who went on to produce Van Halen, the Doobie Brothers, Van Morrison, Aerosmith, Sammy Hagar, and more. The book, which runs $19.95, and it's currently available at Amazon.com. From the man who brought you Van Halen Rising comes Ted Templeman, A Platinum Producer's Life and Music, written by Templeman as told to Greg Renoff. Available for only $19.95 at Amazon.com. Order it today.
Are you a guitar enthusiast? Want to learn all the tricks and licks of the trade? Searching for that Eddie Van Halen sound and speed? Want to play in the style of Alex Lifeson of Rush, Mick Mars of Motley Crue, or Brian May of Queen? Then sign up for Zoom lessons from the best. Lance Turner, the guitars for the #1 Van Halen tribute band, the Atomic Punks. Lance will take you on as his personal student in the comfort of your own home on Zoom. To sign up, contact Lance via email at lancetLessons@gmail.com. Lessons are at an affordable rate of $40 an hour. Email Lance today at lancetLessons@gmail.com. That's LANCETLESSONS@gmail.com. And learn how to jam like a star.
You know, for the way I grew up, I mean, even on the 9-day boat trip from Holland to New York, my father was in the band on the boat, and my brother and I also played piano during intermission. So my whole life has been music. I could not imagine anything else. I mean, it really hit me like a brick wall when I graduated high school, and, you know, you signed everybody's yearbook, and everybody asks you, so what college you going to? Hey, Al, I think we better stick to the only thing that we know, and we just kept it music, because that's what helped us survive and pay the rent when we came to America from Holland.
All right, Dave, you know what time it is.
Well, my buddy Dave, he don't want me around. He says he's tired of watching me let him down. He just wants a good mailbag. He wants only the best. But he hates disappointment better than all the rest. And he says that he thinks that I'm headed for a whole lot of trouble. Well, he thinks that I'm headed for a whole lot of trouble. Well, he thinks that I'm headed for a whole lot of trouble if I don't nail the mailbag intro.
That's right, it's mailbag time again. And boy, you got away with murder in January, so now you are going to pay. Letter number 1 comes from Louise from New York, and she says, Dear Daves, I am a diehard Van Halen fan, but one thing I never understood is that despite David Lee Roth's success with the band and musical achievements, he seems to fall out with just about everybody at some stage. He got along with Ted Templeman for the entire tenure at Van Halen, but falls out with him as soon as he starts his solo career. He falls out with Pete Angelus after working with him for over a decade. He never gets a mention in his Crazy from the Heat book. That's how acrimonious the falling out was. He fired his bodyguard, Big Ed, in the late 90s after working with him for decades. Ed was selling David Lee Roth merch behind his back, apparently. She's referring to Eddie Anderson. He fell out with Billy Sheehan over a girl during the Skyscraper album. He falls out with the Van Halen brothers. Sammy Hagar once said, "No one in the industry wants to work with Dave." Even the many interviews of musicians who work with Dave said he was demanding and not easy to get along with. We never see Dave in public with anyone, male or female. Why is this? Is he that much of a loner or dysfunctional individual that he can't get along with anyone? Or is he just really private and the public doesn't really know who he is? Louise from New York. Well, Louise, you do have a good point. Dave is definitely demanding. He definitely is a loner. Is he dysfunctional? It's hard to say. You'd have to know him better, and none of us do, but I certainly think I'd use the term eccentric more than dysfunctional. Eccentric definitely, I think, labels Dave perfectly. Dysfunctional, I think Dave's pretty highly intelligent to be considered dysfunctional, but he's definitely more likely that he's eccentric. He's also very private. He's had several girlfriends, but he stays out of the spotlight for sure. That's definitely, Dave's M.O. when he's off the stage. He's a confirmed bachelor who walks to the beat of his own drum. That's definite. And I think Dave is, he's driven and he has his own agenda. He kind of has a gypsy mentality, meaning he goes from one project to the next, leaving a path in his wake. And that's part of his M.O. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I agree with you. He's a forward-looking guy. He has high expectations. So those expectations aren't met. I think especially from people who've been working for him for a while, he's ready to move on. So I guess, that other people might see it as disloyal or something like that.
Yeah.
That's the way Dave is. I mean, he can't sit still, right?
Right.
So if he feels like you're not pulling your end of the weight, then he'll just move on.
I think he really is the type of guy who's on to the next. That's sort of his thing, Letter number 2 comes from Rockhead, who spells it with a W-R-O-C-K-H-E-A-D. Rockhead. And he says, "Hey guys, I'm new to the podcast and loving it. And at the moment, I'm listening to Everything Eddie episode. Just before the 2-hour mark during the email segment, somebody mentions that Dave opened up for the Hooters. This was back in 2001. I was at the show where they were on the same bill. Dave did not open for the Hooters, and if I'm not mistaken, Fuel was also on that bill, and Dave closed the show with a very Van Halen heavy set. Being in Philadelphia, the Hooters were always kind of a big thing, but never bigger than Dave. And think about it. Can you ever see Dave agreeing to open for the Hooters? I've attached a link to the set list here, and he sends us a set list. I can't say if they did other shows where the Hooters closed the show, but if they didn't close here, they didn't close anywhere. Just passing along that information, even if it's late. Thanks, Rockhead. Well, Rockhead, welcome aboard. I want to thank you so much for finding us, and thank you for the clarification. That sounds about right to me. I thought it was some sort of festival situation where Dave was playing and the Hooters were playing. It's not so much he was opening for them, but he might have played during the day. But you were there, so we're going to go with your account for sure. It might have been like a collective situation, kind of like a state fair type of thing. I believe you. You were there, that's for sure. What do you say, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot more sense anyway, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you and we went to college in the Philly area.
Yep.
And the Hooters were a big deal there, but yeah, not outside of that area. I mean, for a brief shining moment in the 80s they were when they had a top hit. But yeah, after that, yeah, I'd be shocked if Dave was opening for the Hooters. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
True, and back in the 80s, you were focused on a different kind of Hooters.
I seem to remember you were too.
Oh, we were moving on to letter number 3. Coming from Shannon the Dude. And he says here, deep down, do you believe we were going to get a second Roth/Wolfie lineup album? I did. And do you feel A Different Kind of Truth gets looked at as a slightly lesser album, almost tacked on because it stands solo? I know you guys love it. I love it, and most people who are in our podcast are going to love it, but I feel like it's somehow in a category by itself. You got the original six-pack, the Sammy records, the Gary bucket, and then this album. Don't remind me Tokyo Dome exists. I'd rather have Quiet Dave's vocals on it than Diamond Dave's. Stay frosty, Shannon the Dude. Wow, he's giving you a real heads up there. Well, Shannon, I'm going to tell you a different kind of truth, which is a perfect letter for this episode because Dave and I are celebrating it with a segment that's going to follow this. Well, a different kind of truth is definitely in a class of its own because it's the only Van Halen album without Michael Anthony, and it's still very much Van Halen either way. It's quite a way for the band to go out. It's rare to find a legacy band that makes a new album at this level. Unfortunately, the whole reheated demos tag I felt was unfortunate. It was kind of poor marketing, caused it to suffer in terms of sales, and I certainly blame Interscope Records for that. They were not the ones to release that album. Shame on you, Jimmy Iovine, that you didn't promote this more. I have to be honest with you. I love this album. I go to it a lot. I listen to it. There's so much to learn from this album. Like Wolf said in Van Halen News in his breakdown of the album, oh my God, you could feel the work that was put into it. If you listen with headphones, there's so much good stuff in there. And let me tell you something. If you're an Eddie Van Halen fan and you don't sink your teeth into this album and love every drop of it, you are out of your mind. That album is chock full of Eddie goodness. Really, really strong, as my opinion. What do you say, Dave?
Oh, yeah. I mean, no secret that it's a strong album. Going back to his question, do we think there was going to be a second
that's a good question. With
Wolf? I would say I was always hoping for one.
Yeah, me too.
But I was never holding my breath.
One.
Yeah.
I was getting very leery, and I'm going to say this, and I don't know if we ever talked about this, Dave, but okay, I'm going to ask you this question off of Shannon the Dude's question. If Eddie didn't pass away, say there was no cancer, do you think Van Halen would have gone on, or do you think it would have ended there?
No, I think it would have gone on in some form or fashion. I think they would have still toured. I don't know if they would have pulled it together for another album.
But, I mean, do you think Dave would have been with them?
Yeah, with Dave.
Okay. All right.
With Dave.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if Wolf really wanted to.
Right. Good point.
And everybody else did, they could have pulled it together. Maybe not an album, maybe, like a song or two or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, who the heck knows?
Yeah.
But, I guess we'll never know. I do want to thank Shannon for his compliment, but I got to tell you, I'd rather hear Diamond Days vocals because careful what you ask for, my friend.
That's right. Be careful. That's right. Letter number 4 comes from Nathan Ward, and he says here, first up, I love this podcast. Thank you for all you guys do. I have a question maybe you can help me with. The tape that runs at the start of the 1983 San Paulo show before Ed's guitar comes out roaring, what is that number? I am not a musician, so I can say it's similar to I'll Wait to my ears. So This Is Love, and here's a link to the show, is Nathan Ward. Here is a clip of this right now. Well, that is not I'll Wait. It is simply some music to pump up the crowd before the band comes on. It almost sounds something you'd hear on NBC during the Olympics or something. Now, whether it's something Ed recorded on keyboards is not clear. It could be, but it's simply sort of fanfare to bring the band on stage, but I do not think it's I'll Wait. What do you think, Dave?
No, it's not I'll Wait. I have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like fanfare music. It's music you hear during like one of the sports broadcasts. Letter number 5 comes from Kurt5150 Snyder, and he says, another great podcast. Listening to the interview with Steve Rosen and Dave's conspiracy theory on Ted siding with David Lee Roth breaking the band in 1985. Is it possible that Ted thought Warner Brothers could get more album sales and tour ticket sales out of 2 different bands versus Van Halen as a whole? Eat 'Em and Smile sold 1 million copies. 5150 sold 6 million. 1984 sold 10 million. Could that plan have backfired? Ted thinking he could have made more than 10 million sales out of 2 different albums? Your thoughts? Kurt5150 Snyder. Well, Kurt, I want to say this. Number one, I think your numbers are a little off there. 5150, I believe, is somewhere around 7 million and change. Eat 'Em and Smile, I believe, is over 2 million, and 1984 is definitely over 10 million at this point. I think it's almost over 12. Okay, Kurt, this is my thought process here. I don't think he was looking to get 2 entities. This is what I was thinking, is that the guys were not getting along. The band was splitting. It was physically splitting apart. And I think what Ted was trying to do was keep them all under one roof, maintain control in the hopes that they could keep them afloat and eventually reunite them. But I think having Dave do a solo EP was a bit of kick in the pants to Ed and engineer Don Landy, who kind of played games with Ted Templeman during 1984. So during 1984, you got to remember, Ted Templeman, he's not only the producer of the band, but he's also a label executive. He's got this big band who's coming off the US Festival. They have a lot of heat on them, and they're about to release this big album right before Christmas, and he misses the deadline. So it's not like he's some, goofy producer who's hanging out with the band. This guy is a huge level executive who has been this band's producer for years. He found the band and brought them to stardom, and he comes up empty-handed at the office and doesn't have the master tapes. You have to realize the level of embarrassment that is for him. That's putting Ted in an incredibly uncompromising position, very difficult. They then had to push the album into the next year, which then changes the end-of-year quarter sales. I mean, it really had an impact. Don't get me wrong, it was still a success and did massive, sales and really, boosted 1984 for them. But, that's not the point. They had a plan in place and the whole thing was blown, and it made Ted probably look ridiculous. And I can understand where he's coming from there. But, you have to also understand that his partner, Don Landy, who's worked with him beyond Van Halen with the Doobie Brothers and all the thing, he sided completely with Ed, and he was playing games with the master tapes and hiding them from Ted. And this is a guy who is his right-hand man. So getting the band out of Sunset Sound and having them at 5150, losing the sort of handle on them a bit, and Don Landy siding with Ed and them playing games, that really kind of pissed him off. Did I think he broke Van Halen up? No, I don't think he purposely broke Van Halen up, but I think Van Halen was breaking up, and I think Ted, being the smart, sharp executive that he is all right, hold on. Let's keep everybody under the umbrella. Have Dave do his solo thing. Let's let Van Halen do it. I personally think he had some sort of ushering of getting Sammy into the band. I don't know exactly what the scenario was, but he has admitted that he called Sammy up and whispered in his ear and told him about it, and then all of a sudden Sammy ends up in the band. So I think there was something there, and he even said in his own book that he really thought that Sammy was like a place card holder until Dave got back. But that didn't seem to happen. That's all I can say. What do you think, Dave?
I don't think he called Sam up. I think weren't they just like nonchalantly?
Dave, he said it in his book. It's in his book. He called Sam up. It's in his book. It's not me saying that. It's in his book. He called Sam up and told Sam what was going on with Van Halen, that they were breaking up. It's in his book. Ask Greg.
Okay. No, I believe you. All right. Okay. All right. So is he throwing in a good word for Sam? Sure. Yes. Absolutely. But yeah, like you said, I don't think he was trying to break the band up because he knows. Yeah. Because he knows that it is very, very unlikely that he's going to get 2 acts that sell as much as the 1 act.
Right.
I mean, Dave was like really lucky that he did as well as he did.
Yeah.
Unless you're like a David Lee Roth or a Phil Collins or something like that. Most artists who break from bands and do solo albums don't do that well. So I never really thought that was the intention. Basically, Ted thought, well, let Dave do a solo thing, blow off some steam, then they'll get back together.
Right.
But unfortunately, that did not happen for a long time.
And I tell you, to be honest with you, if you look back on the situation, Dave had more heat on him for Crazy from the Heat than he did on Eat 'Em and Smile. Because I guess it's all timing in life, right? So in 1985, and he came in at early 85 when there wasn't like a ton going on, and he really grabbed the spotlight with the videos, with the way he marketed that EP and the singles. He really kind of nailed it. He just kind of found a little corner and got in there and really got a lot of attention for what was something which was really kind of a small pet project. It wasn't like a big Mongo album. It was a really small thing that blew up way beyond what it actually was. That's number one. Number two, he was coming after Van Halen. So when Eat 'Em and Smile came out, you're talking about maybe 3.5 months after Van Halen already scored huge with 5150. So they hit the road first. I don't know if it was the movie that he was supposed to do that tripped up his timeline or whatever, but had Dave got out there first, maybe it would have been a different story. I'm not really sure. Listen, the album was strong, the band was strong, he had the whole thing going. I also think that Dave would have really been stronger had he stuck with the original Eat 'Em and Smile plan, at least for another album or two, because I really think he would have done better had he stuck with that, Had Dave come out with an album in 88 that was right along those lines and then maybe followed up in 90, but by the time he came out with Skyscraper, which was sort of more of experimental, then he loses Sheehan, then he loses Vi, then he waits till 91 to release it. The timing just all fell behind him. It just didn't work out, but who knows? Hindsight's 20/20, as Dave likes to say. Letter number 6 comes from Tom Jones from Gilbert, Arizona. It's not so unusual to be Tom Jones. So now, he says here, Dave's, back in 1984 when the album came out, they printed the lyrics in Hit Parader. Foot tappin' top down was the official printed lyric. Dave sang it incorrectly in the studio. This is like Bob Dylan's She's 68, but she says she's 54 in Maggie's Farm. But the printed lyric is she's 68, but she says she's 24. P.S. I remember discussing this with my 9th grade buddies of mine at the time, how Dave sang it wrong, but it's his song so he can do what he wants. Ha ha. Tom Jones from Gilbert, Arizona. Well, Tom, I don't think you can go by Hit Parader. The original source, the studio version of the song that's on the record. Plus, if you look up the lyrics today, it says full blast and top down. Now, additionally, the lyric foot tappin' top down doesn't even make any sense in the song because full blast and top down, you're talking about a car. I mean, where do you get the foot tapping from if you're in a car? It just doesn't make sense. What do you say, Dave?
I don't know. I like the direction he was going in because that would certainly explain a lot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know, if anybody has like the official sheet music from 1984 and can share that with us and tell us what the sheet music lyrics are, that would help. Because if those are the same lyrics that were in Hit Parader, I mean, that certainly explains everything.
Yeah, but you can't go by Hit Parader. I mean, that's just
No, I understand, but if somebody has like some sheet music from that time period.
Right, but I would think the original source has got to be the original song, no?
Well, yeah, but if Dave changes the lyrics at the last minute and they've already printed the lyrics to the song elsewhere, it wouldn't be the first time that happens. So
I don't know.
Dave published the lyrics to a different kind of truth in there, and a lot of those lyrics are different than what he sings.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
You should go read them. Yes.
Okay. All right. Letter number 7 comes from Johnny Booth from Fredericksburg, Virginia. He says, hello, Dave and Dave. I really enjoyed your most recent episode, but who am I kidding? I enjoy them all. Your interview with Steve Rosen was great, and I look forward to his book. There is one thing that stuck with me. Despite Ed's issues with Dave and Mike, he still referred to them both as family. It got me thinking about how we are as people. Have family members that get under our skin, yet we still love them because of the bond we share. Maybe it's blood. Maybe it's sharing an experience. For Van Halen, maybe it was the bond that you build creating art or playing gigs in clubs night after night. Dave once referred to Van Halen as brothers out of flesh and the soul. Maybe that's what Blood and Fire really means. Who knows with Dave? Great podcast as always. If you excuse me, I've been playing all my Van Halen vinyl tonight, and I'm going to get back to it. Stay frosty, Johnny Booth, Fredericksburg, Virginia. Well, Johnny, play away, my boy, play away. Enjoy that vinyl for sure. To be honest, I don't care how much we hear about Ed's struggles with Dave and Mike. I still say they have to be bonded on some level. These guys went to war together for years. They're almost like army buddies at this point. Plus, I mean, you have to realize they traveled the world together. They grew up together. They were young people together. They rose to fame together. There's so much there that they shared. And if you think about it, the most ferocious fights in life that you typically have are with the ones that you're closest to. So, Steve's book should be very interesting and revealing. And I suggest everybody who listens to this podcast grab one, and we gave you the order info in the Van Halen news. So definitely check that out. So what do you think, Dave?
I think that I seem to recall that whoever was in the band at that time was Ed's brother.
Yep.
Right? So Ed used that term a lot. I think he meant it when you were in the band.
Yeah.
But when you were out of the band, you were brothers no more. So I think that's just the way Ed was. He expected a certain amount of loyalty.
Yeah.
And that's how he felt about you when you were in the band. You were a brother.
Right. Yep, that's the truth. Letter number 8 comes from your buddy, Dave, Vegas Paul Davis, and he says, I would love a 40th anniversary deep dive of Sammy Hagar's Standing Hampton. It was the album that turned me on to Sammy. I was sorry to learn of producer Keith Olsen's passing last year, and I would love to hear some of those lost Sammy Hagar tracks. Also, after listening to Eddie Van Halen's Donut Life, this is a cool track. Fully completed and totally forgotten. What if Sammy or Mitch Malloy were to add lyrics to it? I think it could be great. P.S. I'm kicking off 2022 seeing Mammoth at a small club in Sacramento on February 25th. I've never heard of co-headliner Dirty Honey. Curious to hear your thoughts on them. Are they a good match for Mammoth? Vegas, Paul Davis. Well, Mr. Vegas, a Standing Hampton 40th anniversary deep dive is a good idea. I will put that on the docket and talk to Dave about it. The song is Donut City, not Donut Life. Donut City. I believe the track you are referring to, that's the one off of Wildlife soundtrack. I don't think you're going to get Al or Wolf to allow anybody to sing on that, though. And to be honest, if they wanted, they could probably still make Van Halen albums if they sift through the vault and got hooks from Ed and things from Ed and got a producer and put Alex and Wolf in to do the bass and drums and had Dave, Sam, or Gary singing. But I don't think we're going to see that happen. We're lucky to get an album of instrumental music or even live archives if that even happens. I don't even foresee that happening. But in regards to Dirty Honey, excellent band, perfect pairing with Mammoth WVH. That's going to be a killer show, so enjoy that. Dave, what do you think?
I don't know too much about Dirty Honey, but from what I've heard, it would definitely be a good co-headlining bill.
Yep.
40th anniversary of Standing Hampton. May have to think about that. That's not a bad idea. Certainly one of Sam's better albums.
Yep.
Probably worth, I haven't heard it in a while. I gotta have to revisit that one, but certainly worth a deep dive. And Donut City is not really conducive a song to adding vocals because it was designed to be an instrumental. So I don't know how well that would work. But I'm sure Mitch Malloy would jump at the chance to add lyrics to that one, too. Like he did the last time. But sadly, I'm not holding my breath for any bonus tracks coming out soon. But like I always say, hey, surprise me and prove me wrong. I'd love it.
Exactly. Letter number 9 comes from Gavin Green. And he says here, I'm listening to the latest episode and I want to weigh in on your discussion of Sammy's solo success, specifically regarding Sammy Hagar's platinum albums VOA and Standing Hampton. I believe that Standing Hampton was not certified platinum until after it was announced that Sammy was joining Van Halen. And I found that VOA didn't achieve platinum status until 1985, the year that it was announced that Sammy was joining Van Halen. And he received a huge bump in sales after the announcement. Van Halen fans wanted to hear what Sammy fronted VH might sound like. Even while he was in the band, his solo catalog benefited. I myself went out and purchased Standing Hampton 3-lock box in a 2-for-1 cassette, VOA on cassette, and something called Cruisin' and Bruisin' by Sammy Hagar at a gas station. As a diehard fan, I have heard of Sammy Hagar but didn't have any of his material until after the VH announcement, and I suspect I was not alone. And when Sammy Hagar says he was as successful as Van Halen and touts his sale numbers, the numbers took a big jump after he joined Van Halen versus when he was just a solo act. But I also still contend that without joining Van Halen, he wouldn't be around today. No successful hard rock solo artist made it out of the 1980s except Ozzy and arguably David Lee Roth. Gavin Green. Well, Gavin, I agree with you about Van Halen bumping his sales for sure. He had a white-hot spotlight on him that would help anybody boost their sales to platinum status for sure. The dates would have to be tracked properly to fully know if VOA had its own platinum status, though, because VOA might have gone platinum. It had a lot of MTV coverage and the hit I Can't Drive 55 and stuff like that, so that's possible, but I'm not sure. So we'd have to check on that. You'd have to really do the deep dive on the dates, but that's very tricky to find out. One thing that really annoys me is we have a very poor platinum tracking system. I don't know if everybody's aware of this. Dave and I discussed it a little bit in the past, but I'll just reiterate it real quick. Like, for example, say you're Def Leppard. Now, we know Def Leppard has 2 diamond status albums, I believe, which is Hysteria and Pyromania, right? But unless you're Def Leppard and you pay money to get these albums properly certified, which means you have to pay and do paperwork for a process to do a full analyzation of an exact account of what you sold, you don't know. So, for example, sometimes a record company will pay to have a certification for a sale of an album at the end of the year that the album came out. But as the years go on, it sells in catalog and stuff like that. Like, for example, we know that 1984 has a diamond status, which is 10 million. But I'm telling you right now, it's way over 10 million. And we don't have that proper tracking because Van Halen, of all bands, is not going to pay and have someone do the paperwork to do the proper analyzation of how many albums they've sold of 1984 since the last time they did the accounting. So I have to be honest with you. It's really piss poor. If you think about the system, there should be an annual account of how much these have sold. It's not happening. So what do you think, Dave?
No, you're right about that. Sadly, they're understated. But I do agree that Sam definitely got a bump up when he joined Van Halen. And yeah, arguably the Standing Hampton album may not have been certified platinum if he hadn't joined Van Halen. Although Sam was on an upward star. Yeah. His star was rising during that time. He was doing better and better, I think, each time. But yeah, I do agree. If he hadn't been in Van Halen and where he was now, I mean, he was like a second-tier rocker back then. That's basically what he is now, except that he used to be a member of Van Halen. I know he doesn't see himself that way, but that's really the way he was. And if he hadn't been in Van Halen, yeah, he wouldn't even be nearly as successful now, at least in terms of where he is on the music scale. Yeah. I mean, he probably still would have been selling tequila and stuff like that, but I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about in terms of his place in the rock and roll community. And he basically, it would have been him and Eddie Money touring together if they were both still
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Meat and potato rockers.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Letter number 10 comes from Keith Jagger from Iowa. And he says, Dave and Dave, your show is fabulous. Thank you for all all the great entertainment. And hey, have you ever tried to get Dave's little friend Jimmy from the No Holds Barred barbecue or one of the security guys from the Lost Weekend? I bet they could tell some good stuff. I heard David Lee Roth EMT trainer talking about him the other day. Man, can you imagine Dave coming up to resuscitate you after a heart attack? He would probably get there and be like, oh, I forgot the fucking paddles. Keep the Van Halen goodness coming. You guys are great. Keith Jagger from Iowa. Keith, thank you so much for writing in. I appreciate that. You know, the problem with some of these guys is they're hard to get a hold of or even discover their names. It's a little tricky. Like when you say, like, Little Jimmy, yeah, I would love to have him on, but I don't even know his name or how to find him. So I do try to track as far as I can. In terms of the Lost Weekend, we interviewed Kurt Jeffries, the winner of the Lost Weekend. We have an episode with that. You can check that out, and he tells a lot of great stories. In terms of Dave being an EMT guy, I cannot understand how he wasn't recognized. He is so identifiable both physically and vocally. It's insane to me. I don't understand how he wasn't recognized. What do you think, Dave?
Well, you got to remember, it's out of context.
Yeah, I know.
You're not expecting to see Dave in that role. And I, too, heard the interview with his EMT trainer on the DLR podcast, which I do recommend. It's good listening, and they do get some good interviews there.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, Dave was basically just very dedicated to being an EMT. And the trainer says, he took it very seriously. So it wasn't a joke to him.
Right. Letter number 11 comes from Dean Evangelista from sunny Australia. And he says, hey, guys, really enjoyed the discussion in the last episode regarding the Panama lyrics. So here's another Panama question. Do you think the intro to Steve Vai's I Would Love To from his Passion and Warfare album sounds very similar to Panama's intro? Keep rocking, Dean Evangelista. Well, Dean, here's the clip of the opening of Steve Vai's I Would Love To. Now here's a clip of Van Halen's Panama. Well, I have to say, there's definitely some lineage there, but the Vai song is way poppier, and the Van Halen song is more based on the Panama riff, whereas Vai sort of starts off with a riff that has a little bit of a similar vibe, but it's really not the same. It's just the beginning part, and then it kind of goes off into a different direction, but I totally see your point. What do you say, Dave?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely similar and reminiscent.
Right.
That's a very poppy song for Steve. I mean, it's almost like it reminds me a lot about some other 80s song during that time period. So close, no cigar, but an interesting similarity nonetheless.
Right. Well, letter number 12 comes from Robert Burton, Dave, and he says, I'm enjoying your latest podcast while taking the dog for a walk this morning. And I just got to the part in the news regarding the Mobile Fidelity SACD release. And I wanted to correct you on a couple of points regarding SACDs and the MoFi Van Halen releases. First of all, SACD releases does in fact require a special player. Many SACDs also include a normal embedded CD layer as well, so that when you play them on a normal CD player, they sound no different than the original CD you noted. However, to hear the higher resolution format, you need a special CD player, although some Blu-ray players also play SACDs, I believe. Also significant, and that you failed to note, is that the Mobile Fidelity is repressing all of the original 6 Van Halen albums on 180-gram vinyl. And the Mobile Fidelity pressings are typically always regarded as the best versions of any vinyl releases, so that could be good. Keep kicking ass, Robert Burton. Thank you for clarifying that, Robert. Dave and I were talking about that in the Van Halen news, how they're putting out the first 6 Van Halen albums on SACDs. I have never seen an SACD player. I would love to do a sound quality test. I know everybody loves this 180-gram vinyl, but the older I get, the more I feel it's about the quality of your sound system at home. home above whether it's vinyl or CD or SACD. I really think it's about your system that you have. That's just my theory. Apparently, some SACDs can be played on Blu-ray players, but there has to be some sort of symbol on the front of it, of the machine, indicating that it does. I don't know. What do you think, Dave?
No, I agree. I think a big part of it is your setup and how good it's going to reproduce the sound.
Well, coming in curiously, Dave, at letter number 13, you know who it is.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane.
It's Midwest fucking Ron. That's right. It's Midwest fucking Ron. And let me tell you something. He has been absent for a while, and now he's back with a double ass whooping to straighten shit out, and he's starting number 1, and he's aiming right at me. Of course, he starts off by praising you. Why am I not surprised? Dave M., it's incredible. I don't know how much money you're paying this guy, but let me tell you something.
Well, maybe if you checked your facts first, you wouldn't have to write these letters.
I guess you're right. So Dave Marconi was correct that Van Halen opened for Montrose long after Sammy left, and Journey in 1978. Later that year, they opened for Black Sabbath. Van Halen and Ted Nugent only played together a handful of times in 1978. One date was the Texas Jam in Dallas on July 1st, and then a couple times in mid-August. They never, quote-unquote, toured together unless you call 2 back-to-back shows a tour. And then he goes on to say, regarding the MoFi SACDs, Dave M. asked if you need a special player, and Dave C. said he didn't think so. Both are right. A true SACD does require a special player, but hybrid SACDs don't. These new MoFi discs are hybrid SACDs, so you can play them on a regular CD player. However, in doing so, you won't get the full benefit of an SACD format. Midwest fucking Ron. So, Midwest Ron, I am corrected about the Journey Ted situation, so let me assume the position here.
Thank you, sir. May I have another?
Oh, that's smarts, that's for sure. And
that was interesting about Ted Nugent, though.
Yeah, the Nuge doesn't remember. The SACDs I got away with. Murder over here. I get a pass on that one because Midwest Ron said that we both had it right. But I understand your point. But in this day and age, how is there a market for SACDs and SACD players? I mean, there's hardly any market for CDs. It's crazy. It's unbelievable. But I tell you, Midwest Ron, he's like a vulture. He hangs in the trees, and the minute he sees a dead body on the road, he's picking at it really hard. He knows about the Texas Jam because I'm sure he was there in spirit somehow.
Well, I guess there must be some kind of audiophile market for that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, like I said last time, I was like, I didn't even know they were still making SACDs. Are they even still making players?
I've never even seen one. I've seen a handful of SACDs. A handful from back in the day. And I used to look at them and I always thought they were a scam. Like you'd see a CD and it was like, and this is back in the day, they were like $40. And I was like, who the fuck is going to pay this? I remember them being like gold or something.
Well, no, I think that was some, were they? I was thinking that was like the Mobile Fidelity one.
Oh, I can, you know, I'm going to get corrected again by Midwest Ron. You watch. Next letter is going to be the gold CDs were a whole other line of product. Oh my God.
Well, I think they were.
Were they? Oh, my God.
I think so. Well, Ron will let us know. But
no,
yeah,
sure.
I think so.
Yeah, he loves sticking it right up my crack. So, letter number 14 comes from Big Bad Bill Mortimer from Boston. And he says, "Hi, guys. I love that you're playing music at the end of your pods these days. Could you please start by giving the details about what you're playing, the year, and who it is? Your last episode had a rendition of Hot for Teacher that I never heard before. It would be interesting to know the information behind those songs. Thanks. Big Bad Bill Mortimer from Boston." Well, I'm going to say those are little pod treats, Bill. We don't really give those out, and they're unlabeled. And if you must know, I will email you privately, but I like to leave those as sort of a guessing game. So it's just for those, a little treat for those who actually make it to the end of the umpteenth hour pod, if you make it all the way to the end. So, but I appreciate you listening all the way to the end, so I will definitely email you and let you know about that. Dave, what do you say?
Can I guess what it is?
Sure.
Was that the one he did at the Les Paul tribute?
Yes, that was Les Paul, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he played with, it was the keyboardist, whose name I can't remember
Jan Hammer.
Thank you. Yes, Jan Hammer.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Letter number 15, Dave, comes from Mike Cartledge in Plymouth, UK. Okay. He says, thanks for reading my previous email and it made my day. I'm not sure if you can help me here, but I was trying to find footage or audio from a gig I attended at the Hammersmith Odeon, which I'm sure was the Edeman Smile Tour. We certainly had Steve, Matt, and Greg there. It's possible one of the best performances I've ever seen, and I've seen a few. The band did an incredible steel drum interlude, but I can't find images, video, or audio of this performance. If you guys know of anything, please let me know. I share your frustration with Dave's silence over Vegas, and it's funny how we all accept it. The man can do no wrong in our eyes. Why has it taken me 33 years to discover the Hide Your Sheep tour? Jesus, it's the gift that keeps on giving just when you thought you had everything. And I feel kind of weird to still be enthused by this group of men. It's a special feeling that I guess only a select group of people get. I never grow tired of the Roth years. And I remember back in the day, my rock fan mates hated Dave for his massive ego, and I always backed up Dave. He filled the ego he'd create like no other human being has ever done. Let's hope all is well and good with him. Thanks again for taking the time to read my sometimes inebriated ramblings, and I've noticed how Eddie pulled those crazy split jumps, pretty much matching Dave's in height. True gods, these people. So on discovering the Hide Your Sheep tour video, East Coast I think, before Mike's bass solo, there's a synth piece that is surely the intro to Jump, 2 years before the 1984 release album. Have you guys heard this? Again, sorry to persist with the enthusiasm. Keep the ball rolling. Mike Cartledge from Plymouth, UK. Well, Mike, on the Roth show that you saw at the Hammersmith Odeon, okay? That show took place August 30th and 31st in 1988. That was not the Edeman Smile Tour. That was the Skyscraper Tour because Matt Bissonette did not tour on the Edeman Smile Tour. That's Greg's brother who filled in for Billy Sheehan on the Skyscraper Tour in 1988. That's for sure. Now, here's a clip of that steel drum performance. Now, the piece that sounded like 1984 at the beginning of Jump, right? It's the beginning part of Mike Anthony's bass solo. Here's a clip of that. Now, if you listen to one of our older episodes, I forget which one it was from last year, Kevin Doogie Dugan, who is Michael Anthony's bass tech, explains how Ed kind of took that from Michael and used it on the album. So I don't know, there's some sort of discrepancy there, but that is what that is. That's part of Mike's bass solo. What do you say to this, Dave?
Right, yeah, I think that was actually sounds coming from Mike's bass.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
he was using effect pedals or something like that.
Yeah.
For. Another feather in the cap to point out Mike's bass guitar talents.
Absolutely. And we come to the last letter in the night, Dave's absolute favorite part of the podcast, letter number 16, and it comes from Brandon Wall, who also is known as Chocolate Slim. And he says here, Hi, Dave and Dave. I can't believe it's 10 years since Van Halen's last studio album, A Different Kind of Truth, with the Van Halen brothers' beloved lead singer David Lee Roth back as their dynamic frontman, introducing newcomer Wolfgang on bass, replacing another beloved member, Michael Anthony. And I remember rushing down to the record store a half hour before they closed the shop to buy the album. I ran back home, opened the CD, listen to it all night long. Other than Tattoo being the worst fucking song on the album, A Different Kind of Truth is kick-ass vintage Van Halen, balls to the wall, riffs, great songs, mind-blowing guitar solos, and a great mixture of old and new, both in chemistry with the Van Halens and Diamond Dave, with the music and the people. And my favorite songs of the album are She's the Woman, Chinatown, Blood and Fire, Bullethead, As Is, Out of Space, and Big River. And with that being said, I have a few questions for you guys. Number 1, what's your favorite songs on Different Kind of Truth? Number 2, what is a song you don't like on A Different Kind of Truth? And number 3, what song that you don't like on A Different Kind of Truth, and what would you replace it with as an unreleased song? Cheers to you guys in the podcast, and happy trails. Stay frosty, Brandon Wall, a.k.a. Chocolate Slim. Well, Brandon, he's very enthusiastic listener. He's been with us since the beginning. Brandon's the guy, when I released the podcast, 4 hours later, he asked me when the next one's coming out. It's like, Brandon, give me a minute, man. And I was like, they take a long time. Yeah, he's very enthusiastic. He's always very supportive. So thank you, Brandon, for always listening. We appreciate your enthusiasm. My favorite songs on the album, I love them all. I'm going to tell you right now. But my favorites are Out of Space, As Is, and She's the Woman. In terms of the ones I don't like, I love them all. There's none of the ones I don't like. I'm going to criticize one, though. One that I have a little issue with is The Trouble with Never. And the reason I have an issue with it is I feel like the chorus doesn't match the rest of the song. I feel like the chorus is very light and poppy, and I feel like the rest of the song is pretty heavy. And I don't feel like they match. I still love the song. It's almost like a switch that goes off. It sounds like another song. It's a little weird. However, I would not replace it with anything else. There's nothing really unreleased that I would really rather be there other than that song. So I'm going to pass on that. What do you think, Dave?
Well, to answer his questions, I would say my favorite songs are She's the Woman, Blood and Fire, Out of Space, and Stay Frosty.
Okay.
One song I could do without is Tattoo.
Okay.
And replacing a song with an unreleased song, I would replace Tattoo with something closer to the original Down in Flame. But if you're thinking of a different song entirely, I would pick We Die Bold.
Okay, that's good. That's a good one. Okay. Well, that wraps up the mailbag segment. And I want to thank you guys for hanging in, and we are on to our special of A Different Kind of Truth, the origin of A Different Kind of Truth. It is going to be coming up where Dave and I get into the seeds of the demos, of which they came from. We're going to pair them up and show you which songs came from where, and we're going to also show you which ones were new and which ones the other ones came from, and we'll get into all the details on that. We're going to have clips to pair them up and show you the parts that are similar, and then where it gets different. It's going to be very intricate and very, very, very detail-oriented. Then we have our interview with the ladies from Pasadena for Van Halen, which is the group that is supporting the Van Halen name in the city of Pasadena, where they're trying to get Van Halen represented in the city on different monuments and different places in order to show that Van Halen pride in the city of Pasadena and California, where the Van Halens grew up. So we have a power pack episode for Dave and I's birthday month, February, celebrating the 10th anniversary of A Different Kind of Truth and Pasadena Pride right here on the podcast, and that is all coming up next. Take a listen.
I kind of expected people were going to dance to this one. I kind of figured that this is going to hit a chord in people because it's rocking, but it's not rock and roll. It makes you feel like movement, but it's not really rock and roll. Got away with it, Got to make that left turn. People say, "Oh, he's just going to go make rock and roll, man. It's going to sound like rock without Eddie." And it's not going to be as good. It won't have the personality and come like that. So I had to say, I'm going to make the quick move. And it's Roth across the finish line again.
The long-awaited Van Halen book from legendary rock journalist Steve Rosen is almost here. Tone Chaser, Understanding Edward, my 26-year journey with Edward Van Halen. This is an over 400-page odyssey of Rosen's decades interviewing and being friends with the late guitar god, Eddie Van Halen. Rosen says, I spent 14 long, hard months writing Tone Chaser. It was both the most difficult story I've ever written and the most rewarding. I wanted to be honest and transparent as I possibly could, which was not always an easy thing to do. In the end, this was the most complete and comprehensive book I could have possibly written. There was nothing left to say when I reached the last page. With every word I wrote, I was reminded of the time I spent with Edward, and that hurt terribly. But it also brought back what a remarkable experience that was, and how insanely lucky I had been to have ever known him, and astonishingly to have been friends with him. I hope you can feel everything I felt. That is the purpose of this book. Pre-sales are currently going on now for this self-published book. PayPal Steve directly at scrosen@sbcglobal.net. That's scrosen@sbcglobal.net. It's $47 for those who are buying it inside the U.S., and that includes shipping. $95 for those who are buying it overseas, and that includes shipping. Tone Chaser. Understanding Edward, my 26-year journey with Edward Van Halen. Don't miss out. Order it today. Hello, loyal listeners. Wanted to let you know about our new Patreon. If you like what we do and you have the means, drop us a donation to keep the podcast going. Go to patreon.com/DD Unchained. That's patreon.com/DDUNCHAINED. Doesn't have to be huge. Any side's contributions are greatly appreciated. Those who contribute $40 or more will get the Unchained package. Trust me, it's worth it. Contribute $65 or more and get the Romeo Delight package, which is Unchained plus more. And $95 scores you the Top Jimmy package, which is the kitchen sink. If you're a Van Halen hardcore and listen to this cast, this is stuff you'll appreciate. It's ear candy. Go to patreon.com/DD Unchained. Email your contact information to ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com. What is understood need not be discussed.
This is Randy Bachman of BTO on the Guess Who. You're listening to Dave and Dave Unchained.
And if you would like to send us a letter asking a question or making a statement or whatever you'd like to say, you can send it to ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com.
Martin Popoff here. Hope you're enjoying this latest episode of Dave and Dave Unchained, the wise swamis on all things VH. Just wanted to remind you that at martinpopoff.com, I've got 2 Van Halen books that I wrote. One is Van Halen, a visual biography, which is basically a big hardcover coffee table book, 400 images, 20,000 word detailed timeline. And the other one is called Unchained, a Van Halen user manual. It's the sort of 120,000 word, very academic, a lot of crazy chapters, a lot of trivia, wordy book that I did on Van Halen. So yes, go to martinpopoff.com. I sign and ship those out of my office here in Toronto. There's PayPal buttons for the US, international, and Canada. Again, Van Halen, a visual biography, and Unchained, a Van Halen user manual. Back to Dave and Dave.
You know, people ask me all the time, when are you going to do a solo record? Well, every Van Halen record's a solo record because we all, within this unit, have the freedom to express our ideas within the band. Yeah. So if I did do a solo record, which every Van Halen record is, because I'd ask them to play on it anyway.
Okay, Dave, well, if you can believe it, we are now old enough to celebrate the 10th anniversary of A Different Kind of Truth. If you can believe that. I can remember very clearly the day we went to the tour. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember the day when the album was announced.
Oh, what day was the album announced? I don't even remember that day.
That was the day after Christmas.
Oh, when it showed up on a billboard?
Well, I don't know if it showed up on a billboard, but I just remember reading about it online.
Okay.
So this had to be like December of 2011.
Wow.
And I don't know if it was a formal announcement or things started leaking out. But I think there was some kind of indication from Van Halen that something was coming and being announced soon. And I just remember being all giddy, like, it's the day after Christmas and I'm getting another present. Because there have been kind of sort of rumors floating around.
Right.
But, like most Van Halen rumors, it was nothing definitive, kind of, sort of. But this was like the first real thing that an album was coming out.
Remember, it was a long time after the reunion tour. This was years. I mean, much time had gone
this
by.
Was like, because the reunion tour started in 2007, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, and this album came out 2012. So we're talking like 5 years later.
Yeah, it was significant. And, we waited for a while because they reunited. The tour was very good. And then it was like the rest of 2008 went by, 2009 went by, 2010 went by. And then you're like, this is not going to happen. It was like you just didn't even know. And it's hard to believe, though, even though we had the internet still at that time and, Twitter and everything, I have to say nothing penetrated the Van Halen bubble. It was unbelievable. If you think about it, they're the one band that I could say no stuff really leaked the way other bands' stuff leaks. I mean, it's crazy.
No. In fact, they came out, they announced the album, was like, oh my God, there's an album.
I know.
And then the track listing eventually came out.
Right.
And none of that had really leaked before. And then when we found out some of the songs were reworked demos, and I know we'll get more into that in a little bit.
Exactly.
But people were really excited about it.
Oh, totally. And there's also a lot of misconception about this album. In fact, there's the most misconception about this album in comparison to other Van Halen albums, and that's why Dave and I are doing this. So we're not only here to celebrate the 10th anniversary of A Different Kind of Groove, an album of which we both absolutely love and want everybody to take out and listen to, because listen, that's the last drop, folks. That's all we got. So it's important to do that, but it's also important because some of this got bad press. It sort of got written off. And it was a little strange, people spinning it, it's old reworked demos, this and that. And yeah, I understand why they were shaking their head at that, but that is not what this is. Yes, there are some hooks and some stuff from some old demos, and we're going to get into all that. We're going to break down the 13 songs, not the way we did on our episode when we did our special Different Kind of Truth episode many, many years ago. I think that might have been our first year of podcasting. What we're going to do here is show you the origin of these songs, where they came from, what's new, what came from where. And some of you might be surprised. There's some really interesting facts. I've done a lot of research on this for this particular special, and that's what we're going to get into today. So, like Dave said, the album came out February 7th of 2012. It seems like it's not that long ago, but it's 10 years ago. It's unbelievable.
Just in time for our birthdays.
That's right. That's right. It was a big birthday present for us. And if you remember, Dave, that birthday was 40. Or no, it was 42.
42.
Well, still.
You're getting so old you can't remember what birthday it was anymore.
That's right. Okay, so now this is the 12th and final studio album from Van Halen. Now, the other thing is, it's quick to note that it's the first, obviously, with David Lee Roth since 1984. It's the first with Wolf, so a lot of, firsts there. It's also the first since Van Halen 3, which was released in 1998. So think about that jump. That's 14 years. That is incredible. 14 years, with the exception of the 2004 3 songs on Best of Both Worlds, that greatest hits compilation. Other than that, there hasn't been a studio album in 14 years. That was really, really brutal. Just a brutal, brutal time. We're going to get into some of that here. So now, it was produced by John Shanks, and if you guys want to check out our interview with John Shanks, it's in one of our older episodes, one of the early ones in the first year. We did a whole interview with him that was really interesting. Now, there are 13 songs on the album. 7 of the 13 came from ideas from demos, and we're going to get into very specifics on that. So now, the thing is, the way Eddie wrote and always wrote. No one knew about it because we didn't have the digital age. Back then, everything was just on tape. Eddie would write licks and ideas on tape, and he would go back and mine those tapes for years. House of Pain, off the 1984 album, was written in the 70s. They used to play it live all the time in the 70s, even before they had a record contract. On top of that, they had other songs. Take Your Whiskey Home. I think Mark Stone was in the band when they used to play that. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's an original idea that he created. So if he decided to shelve it or wait until it was ready to come out and put on an album, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's not act like they're doing covers from, like, old Deep Purple records. That's ridiculous. These are his songs that were never, ever released. However, they are completely reworked in many, many ways. We'll get into that. So, in addition to that, it's also important to note that's 7 songs out of the 13, right? So what do we got left? 6 songs. That's 6, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that my job on the show to verify your math?
Exactly. Well, that's why you're here. That's why you're here. You got to make sure you're on.
It's nice to know I'm good for something.
Oh, yeah. Oh, come on. Well, we know how sluggish and bitter and all those things that they describe you as. Okay. So now the interesting part of this is 4 of these songs came from the 2000 session with Roth. So everybody who was always wondering, what are those songs? I want to hear those songs. We have those songs. And the songs are Honey Baby Sweetie Doll, As Is, Blood and Fire, and The Trouble with Never. Now, Blood and Fire is from a demo called Ripley. We'll get into all of this from the 1984 session. It was also on the Wildlife soundtrack, so that has earlier origins. But those 2000 recordings with Roth were those 4 songs. So they were already starting with that. So we always wanted those songs. Now, those recordings have Michael Anthony on them. Perhaps they sound a little different. They wouldn't be that much different because it's pretty much the same. However, those are the 4 songs. So the songs that we always wanted to hear, we have them. However, we would like to hear those recordings, but maybe one day, who knows. So now, here's the thing. They did the 2007 tour, 2007-2008 tour, and Ed had a great time. Everybody, got back together. They made a lot of money on that tour. They did really, really well. It was a real revival after such a dormant period. But Ed was reluctant to record new material because when he did the 3 songs for the Best of Both Worlds, it left a bad taste in his mouth because he felt like the public did not care at all. And he told Guitar World this, is a direct quote from Ed: "I didn't want to do something new because I felt that even if we did, the fans wouldn't like it anyway. We just snap back and realize, hey, we're doing this for us. This is what we do. We make music for a living." So now, the original plan for this project was not to make a studio album. The original plan for A Different Kind of Truth was going to be a B-sides compilation. And what they were going to do was they were going to put on 3 new songs that were reworked from old demos, and they were going to do sort of a B-sides collection, sort of like an album tracks collection with like songs like Drop Dead Legs and Girl Gone Bad and things like that, plus the 3 reworked demos. And the man who was driving the charge here is our friend Wolfgang. Wolfgang discovered rough and unreleased demos from the band's archives. He pulled out the ones he thought had potential, and he brought them to Eddie and Alex to rework. One of them was She's the Woman. One of them was Bullet Head. Another one was a song called Let's Get Rockin', which ended up turning into Out of Space. And like I said, we'll get into all the details on each song. So now, as they started to dig deeper, they found more and more ideas and songs and things like that. At the same time, Ed was also writing new songs. Dave started getting excited. Everybody in the band started getting excited. Now, according to Ed, he says here, this direct quote from Ed, "We ended up recording demos for 35 songs." That is a direct quote from Ed from Guitar World. Now, we're going to get into it later. Wolf kind of denies this, but I don't know if they're talking about 2 separate things, but that is what Ed said. They were thinking about other producers before they got to Shanks. They were thinking about Rick Rubin because he had produced the Black Sabbath record, and he asked Tony Iommi who would be a good producer. and he suggested Rick Rubin, but they didn't think he'd fit the Van Halen vibe. Then they were thinking about Pat Leonard, and apparently he was the one who was involved in making the second album with Gary Cherone, which apparently was called Love Again. I still have to find out the story behind that album. That is such a mystery. Anyway, Shanks came from Roth. He suggested Shanks because Roth used to work at Henson Recording Studios doing a lot of his own songs and demos there, and he met Shanks there. And what happened was Eddie put Wolf in charge, and he was working side by side with Shanks. He was almost like a co-producer. This is how involved Wolf was with this album, which also dates back to why Valerie said there would have been no album without Wolf, and she's 100% right. So Eddie relinquished a lot of the control to his son, which was great. Now, what they did was, by mid-January of 2011, the band moved into Henson Studios. If you could believe it or not, Roth convinced them to start working there as opposed to 5150. And they were working with staff engineer Martin Cook and engineer Paul David Hager. During the day, the band would record 5 days a week for 12 hours. And Roth would come in at night and do vocals. Within 3 weeks, they got the instrumental tracks down and completed. And then by the end of March of 2011, the band returned to finish the album at 5150 with engineer Ross Hogarth, because Eddie said, I couldn't hear the songs at Henson the way I'm used to. Everything sounded like it had a sock over it. So by the time that all the recording got done, the final mixing took place in the summer of 2011. And then everybody had to approve each mix. So, everybody had to kind of sign off on it. Now, the 3 songs that are brand spanking new on the album, with no lineage prior, are You and Your Blues, Chinatown, and Stay Frosty. Of course, we know the album came out on Interscope Records. Originally, they were going to sign with Columbia Records. And for some reason, and I don't know why, but Roth indicated he would not sign with Columbia. I don't know if he had a beef with somebody or whatever, but they wouldn't sign with Columbia. Strange enough, what I don't understand is, if you remember back to the days of Ray Daniels, he had set up a whole contract with Warner Brothers, but the band split with Warner Brothers in 2001. Some people say it was because the band cleaned house completely from everything. Obviously, they broke up with Ray Daniels, they broke up with Gary, like everything was just cut loose, And also Mike, at that point almost pretty much, but it was sort of like unofficial at that time. Anyway, the first single came out on January 10th, 2012, which was Tattoo, and it really did well. It went to the #1 song added to US, Canada, Finland, and Netherlands on the radio, and it also charted in Sweden, Belgium, Germany, and the UK, and it was also the #1 release on iTunes. By January 23rd, the song peaked at #1 on the Billboard's Hard Rock Singles chart, becoming #1 and the most played song at classic rock radio, and it was the most added song for mainstream and active rock radio. Now, excerpts of Tattoo as well as Stay Frosty were featured on the CSI Crime Scene Investigation show, just to get some publicity there. But they didn't wait too long to release the follow-up single, which was She's the Woman. That was on February 28th. Now, the album, if you remember, Dave, came out with a deluxe packaging. There was a deluxe edition which had a DVD with it. And on that DVD, they had this thing called the Downtown Sessions, with acoustic versions of Panama, You and Your Blues, Beautiful Girls. Now, here's the weird part. There was a recording of You Really Got Me, but it was not on the DVD. It was only released to be posted online. Very strange. I never understood that. And then they had those incredible interviews with Dave, Alex, and Eddie, which were posted online, but not on the DVD. And I always wondered why that and the You Really Got Me song were not put on that DVD. It was so prime for that. What do you think of that?
Well, if I remember Roth's introduction to the song, it was something about publishing or copyright or something like that. They couldn't put it on the DVD for some reason, because it was originally planned to be there, and then it wasn't, and then they had replaced it with like the intro to You and Your Blues, which is basically David Lee Roth doing his Homer Babel Zebula routine until they actually do the song. But you're right about the interviews, though, because those interviews are really interesting. And I think, and those were posted like months later.
Yeah,
if
way
not,
later.
like years later. Maybe not years later, but it was a while.
Yeah.
Like after the album had come out, that those started to be released on the internet. And you're like, wow, this would have been great, interesting stuff as almost like a mini documentary.
Yeah, it is. And it's the first time I've ever seen them together talking like that. So it was almost like a rarity,
Oh, yeah. But I certainly didn't mind what we got as far as the bonus DVD because, I mean, who'd ever think you'd see Van Halen playing acoustically to begin with? That was definitely a treat and worth the bonus.
Absolutely. Now, the cover art was designed by Los Angeles-based Smog Design, and the concept was put together by Roth. Smog co-owner John Hayden had picked the image featuring a New York Grand Central Railroad J3A Dreyfus Hudson steam locomotive, and it has similarities to the 1975 Commodore's album Moving On. Now, the tour kicked off on February 18th in Louisville, Kentucky. However, there were 3 warm-up shows, one at Cafe Wha in New York City, another at Henson Studios in Hollywood, California, and the Forum in Inglewood, California. But the tour started in Louisville, Kentucky on February 18th, consisted of 46 shows, and ended on June 26th in New Orleans. And it was the 8th most lucrative tour of 2012. It grossed, take a guess, Dave, how much did it gross?
70 million.
Well, 54 million, and they played to over 500,000 people on the tour. Now, a second North American leg was canceled, and the band claimed exhaustion. It was followed by a postponement of 3 Japanese concerts, and Eddie ended up going for emergency surgery to treat his diverticulitis. Then in 2013, they made up those Japanese concerts, and they also did 3 headlining gigs at festivals at Stone Music Festival in Sydney, Australia, Rock USA at Ford Festival Park in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and the California Mid-State Fair at Paso Robles in California. So now the album got positive reviews. And another couple of facts that are interesting on the album. There's only one song that has synthesizer, which is Tattoo, and it's not played by Ed. The synths are played by Dave, which is interesting. And Wolfgang actually plays guitar on the album on Chinatown. He plays the additional guitar next to Ed. And Dave plays a little acoustic guitar for Stay Frosty. That's Dave in the beginning there for the Stay Frosty song. Now, when Guitar World did an interview with Ed, and Ed did a lot of the press here, Dave did not do a lot of press for this album, which I always thought was a mistake, but if you look up the press that he did, you want to talk about Humala Babala Zebula Bubala. Holy, he doesn't answer anything. He literally doesn't answer anything. It's almost like you look at the questions, you look at the answers, and they're so mismatched, you can't believe it. But the whole thing, Ed said, the whole project was stemmed on Wolf's enthusiasm. He said he was going, come on, come on. We went up to 5150 and started jamming, and it was like a comfortable pair of shoes. And he said they went right after the tour was done, and they started jamming because Wolf was really looking forward to it. And he said working with Dave again was like we had never left each other. It was that comfortable. We've known each other since high school. And when you have old friends, 5 or 6 years can go by and you don't see each other and you just pick up where you left off. And he also gave Dave a compliment. He says his lyrics on the album are full of wit and personality with a lot of street wisdom. Some of his lyrics are hilarious. Dave's good. He's well read and it shows in his lyrics. I don't know of anybody else who can write lyrics that are so out there yet in. Some of his stuff is blatant, but a lot of it makes you think. It's tripped out and deep, but not so deep that you can't relate to it. I think he's brilliant. And he also said that, and this is the really, really sad part. This is Ed speaking, of course. He says, as far as I know, when we're done with this cycle, we'll take a little break and make another record. That's what I hope to do. I'm pretty sure that's our intention. We truly are a band. It's not just a one-off thing. I don't want to say it's a rebuilding process. If anything, it's a continuation. I see us doing this for a long, long time. So obviously, a lot of sadness to hear that because, number one, that didn't happen. Number two, Ed got sick. So now this is where a little controversy comes in. So like I said earlier in this conversation that Ed said they demoed 35 songs. Now Wolf says, I don't know where this rumor came out saying that we recorded like 60 songs. What's on the album is everything we recorded. I have no idea where that rumor came from. There was one song we almost did that we wrote in the studio, but it fell apart before we got a chance to do it. So I don't know if Wolf means they didn't like officially record extra material, and Ed is referring to like, hey, we knocked out 35 demos. Because a demo and recording are two different things. Because if you're just doing demo, you're running tapes, you're putting songs together, it's like a scratch copy. But if you're actually like officially recording a song, they probably, considering they were using Henson and they were time pressured, were probably pretty selective as to what they use. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's all in how you define songs recorded for the album.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you have anything to add, Dave? Anything to add about the album, or?
No, man. I think it covered everything.
Okay.
Right there.
All right. So then
the only thing I'll add is you had mentioned after they had recorded the 3 songs for Best of Both Worlds.
Right.
Ed was a little gun shy about recording new songs. I think he was gun shy before that.
Really?
Well, I think he was very gun shy after the Van Halen 3 album.
Oh, yeah.
And the lack of success for that. And then he comes out and records 3 songs for Best of Both Worlds. And they were all right, but nobody was tripping over themselves over those either. So you can imagine his hesitation and his attitude for, well, no one's going to care anyway. So really it was kudos to Wolf for convincing him that people do care, and even if they don't, so what? We're just going to record this album and have some fun doing it because we're a band and that's what we do.
Absolutely. So now what we're going to do is we're going to break down the 7 songs that have seeds from the old demos. So we're not going to talk about the other songs. The other ones were new. You can check back at the old episode. We discussed the whole album as a whole. But what we wanted to really do here is, in addition to kind of unveiling some of the background information on this album that we didn't have in the other episode for the 10th anniversary, what we wanted to do is, I know so many people talk about this being, a collection of old demos, which fucking came right out of Sammy's mouth. It's just old shit, And, he also said something that really burned my ass. Is that's leftover shit. I heard that stuff. That's not true at all. This is like old demos from the 70s. Dave kind of pinpointed it, with the exception of Blood and Fire, which comes from Ripley, which was in the mid-80s. He said the rest of it's sort of between 75 and 77. So this is really in the early stages of Van Halen. And these songs come from, with the exception of Blood and Fire. So you're going to start with the song Tattoo, of course. And we all know Tattoo. And this is how Tattoo goes. Here's a clip.
Tattoo, tattoo, show me your dragon magic. Tattoo, tattoo, so I don't buy your graphic.
Okay, so we all know that's the first single back. Interesting choice for a single. I personally would have gone with She's the Woman. I really thought that is such a Van Halen sounding song, and if you're going to come back after such a long period of time, I thought it would make sense to really come back with that, but that's here nor there. They still released that as a single. I happen to love Tattoo. There's a lot of people that don't like this song. I happen to love this song. I think it's got great groove. I love the chorus. I think the lyrics are fantastic. I love the video. Now, here's a clip from the song Down in Flames. This is the song that was the original seed for Tattoo. Here's a clip. Now, what I want to show you right here is the opening of Down in Flames. Here it is. is now the ending of Tattoo. Here's the end of Tattoo. Now, the songs share a specific groove. Down in Flames is basically sort of a skeletal frame that Eddie's working from. Roth's melody is totally different. It's almost like a completely different song in terms of Roth's melody. Tattoo is way more fleshed out song. Down in Flames is totally sort of like a throwaway in the sense. The chorus is very hooky for Tattoo. This chorus is not that hooky for Down in Flames. You could see how Down in Flames, there's some interesting parts there, but the song is not like fully working. A lot of these demos, it's almost like car parts that were removed off an old car and put on a new car. And they took the best of the song and used it for seedlings for a new song. But of all the songs, this is very different. There's the groove is right there. You can hear that groove. I'll show you that opening and the closing, that kind of interesting there. The chorus is very hooky for Tattoo, and there's a certain element to this song that almost evokes Me Wise Magic, in my opinion. So, like in the spoken word part right here,
I got Elvis on my elbow when I think Elvis talks. I got hookahs on the back of my leg. Ain't she who when I walk?
and then the spoken word part for Me Wise Magic.
I know what you're thinking. What you're thinking. See.
Then there's this certain part of the chorus from Tattoo.
Show me your dragon magic. Tattoo. So I don't buy your graphic.
And a certain part of the chorus from Me Wise Magic.
Don't you trust me? Me Wise Magic.
That just sort of reminds me of each other there, but that's not neither here nor there. That's just a side thing. But the guitar work by Ed is not the same. It's totally different. And in fact, the one on Tattoo is way hotter, obviously. And this song is, like I said, underrated and overlooked. I think Dave sounds great. He's high energy. Down in Flames is way more of a 70s sort of album track, you know? Tattoo builds and builds, whereas Down in Flames is sort of a throwaway. So what do you think, Dave?
Well, I don't think it's a throwaway. I do think it muddles a little bit.
Yeah.
But this is one of those songs that you only ever heard live on a bootleg.
Yeah,
you
true.
never heard a studio demo version of it. So I think it was one of those songs they were trying to work out live and see if they could make something of, but they never really got to the point of where they liked it enough to record it as a demo, or at least it never got leaked as a true blue demo. It is a 70s rock track, and it is one of the songs they reworked the most for a different kind of truth.
Oh, yeah.
But I think they kind of lost something when they were working on Tattoo. Tattoo, out of all the songs on the album, is a very pop song.
It's not as aggressive as Down in Flames. It's also not as aggressive as the rest of the album.
No, it's not. And that's why a lot of people
Yeah.
aren't that crazy about it. I understand why they picked it as a single, because it's very poppy. It's a little lighter. If you're going to look for crossover appeal, this is the song you want to choose. But if they had redone it more in a traditional mode of the way the song originally was,
Right.
I think it would have fit in better with the album.
Oh, okay.
And I really love Ed's solo, the way he did it the first time on Down in Flames. I just think that solo is the bee's knees, especially the way it ends.
Let's play a clip of that so everybody can get a taste right here. excellent. Okay, yeah, I see.
I
What
mean,
you're
the
saying,
way
yeah.
he ends it with the wow, wow.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I just love that.
Yeah.
And like Ed had already started using this song bits and pieces for their cover of You're No Good. And in my opinion, it kind of lost something in the translation.
Okay.
It didn't really work that well. And then they tried it again with Tattoo. And I don't think it kind of worked that well either. I think they should have went back and, I mean, my preference was they should have reworked the song the way it originally was. Roth would have put new lyrics, I'm sure, like he did everything else. But this is one of those songs I wish they had stuck more to the demo than what it ultimately came out to be.
Yeah, and this is very much showcasing Roth, I think. It's very Roth.
No, the newer version
Yeah,
is.
that's what I mean,
The,
yeah.
the Tattoo
the
version.
Tattoo version,
You could tell, he definitely ran with it. I mean, he's the one playing keyboards on the song. You know, lyrically, he does like that little talk sing thing he does. I'm not saying it's like Beautiful Girls, David Lee Roth, but he's definitely running with it on this track.
Now, the next one is Blood and Fire, and that has the origin of sort of the mid-'80s, is around 1984 or so, where this comes from the song Ripley. So here's a clip of Blood and Fire.
Always tell the winners, saints and the sinners down at the starting line. I'm a lucid vision, be unforgiven. I'm your wave toss guy. Kingdoms that we were touching, trouble by the desert. Stakes have never been high. Come back when you're younger, 'cause I can feel the thunder. 1-800 is time. Oh yeah! We came through blood and fire. We came through blood and fire. Now look at all of the people here tonight.
Now here's a clip of Ripley. And as you can see, like before, and this is a running theme, as you'll see, there's sort of a basic backing track. Ripley comes off way poppier and lighter, way more fluffy than Blood and Fire, but this is clearly the foundation for the song. However, Roth's melodies and lyrics dominate the direction of Blood and Fire for sure, and this was supposed to be the third single. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was because of Ed's health that derailed the tour and they didn't put more singles out, and Ed sort of has this incredible ripping solo at 2 minutes and 38 seconds that I want to highlight right here. I thought that was really fresh, and I love Roth coming in with
Told you I was coming back. Say your messages. Say it like you mean it.
And the song escalates to a much higher level than Ripley, for sure. The original was used for the movie soundtrack, sort of background music in The Wildlife, the movie Eddie scored. But apparently Dave said it was from the 1984 sessions. So what do you think of this song, Dave?
I think this should have been the first single. If they wanted to go with a song that wasn't rocking so much and a little poppier, this is the one they should have went with. And that whole lyrical part that you just discussed about Roth being back, I mean, that's reunion song all over the place.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the perfect reunion song, other than It's About Time, which lyrically with Sam was a great reunion song. This one would have been right up there. It's too bad they didn't use it. It is very similar to Ripley instrumentally. They don't stray from it too much in the foundation of the song.
Right, yeah, the foundation.
But yeah, like a lot of the other songs we're going to discuss, they definitely took the demo and made it that much better, because we're talking about a seasoned band that had been around for years and finally fully fleshed out the song. And I think they did a great job with this one. Roth's melody definitely adds to it. And yeah, you're right about Ed's solo. Definitely top notch. Like I said, musically, doesn't stray too far from the original, but man, I just wish they had released this as the first single, because then people really would have gotten excited. Old school fans, general music fans. I mean, people just would have went ape, as opposed to, all right, Tattoo's good, doesn't suck. And then, you know, the rest of the album came out and it was like, oh, okay, this is really good.
Right.
Like, there's a little bit of hesitation there. If they had opened up with this song, or even like She's the Woman, which is total classic Van Halen.
That's
not too poppy, but total. But if you want to appeal, we'll get to that. But you know, if you want to appeal to the classic hardcore fans, then you know, you go with She's the Woman.
Yeah, She's the Woman has the energy of like a Panama. Like, Panama is a absolute classic Van Halen song. But you know what I think they were going for, Dave? I think they were going for, like, the 1984 model. They were thinking of Tattoo being like Jump, and I think they were thinking of She's the Woman being like Panama. And then,
totally agree with you.
It's interesting.
Yes.
Now, the next song is Bullet Head, which obviously is derived from the song Bullet Head. And the song is very similar to the original demo, although Roth added a lot more work on Roth's end here. Here's the clip of Bullet Head from the Different Kind of Truth album.
Your pain. If everything is coming your way, you're facing the wrong lane. Bullet head, by the moon until you're crazy dead. Bullet head, got a different kind of truth. Bullet head, yes, you are a danger. I shot just like you.
Now here's a clip of the old Bullet Head demo. Now, the song is something that used to be in their live set. Same aggression, energy, and structure. However, the new version is much fuller shaped song because the lyrics are more fleshed out, has a much fuller melody, and the melody is also shaped around the phrase, a different kind of truth, which the album's title comes from. It's almost got like a punk vibe to it in a way. It's similar to Loss of Control. The Different Kind of Truth version has a bridge, and Ed's solo is way more fierce on the new version. The old one's a little muddy. The old song is sort of a rough sketch of the idea of what they were going to do in the future. But it's pretty clear that the song Bullethead, though, is a similar vibe and energy and structure. This is very close to the original, with obviously Roth cleaning up his lyrics and definitely strengthening the chorus. What do you think, Dave?
Oh, yeah, definitely very close to the original version of the song. But this one is a great example, like pretty much the rest of the songs we're going to talk about. The demos or the live versions were very good. But again, we're talking about a band who by this time had another 30 plus 40 years of experience behind them, and finally the opportunity to flesh these songs out the way they should have been. So the studio version on A Different Kind of Truth is definitely better than the live version. I don't think they ever recorded a studio demo of this song.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
This was one they were trying out live, and they never really were completely happy with it. It never ended up anywhere. But man, I gotta tell you, when I heard Bullethead was going to be on the Van Halen album, and this was one of the songs they kept the title to, and I was like, they're really putting Bullethead on the new album.
That was shocking.
Really?
Yeah,
because first of all, that song was like 2 minutes long.
Yeah, exactly.
And, it's like, Bullethead, right? And you're like, really? Like, that song was, you're right, it has a definite punky vibe going on there. And to me, like, I thought it was good, but again, it was almost, is it a throwaway track? I don't know if I go that far, but you kind of almost wonder, well, they never did anything with it, so, they didn't think much of it. And now here it is. It's coming back on A Different Kind of Truth. And they made it work, and it really added some muscle to the album. It was a little longer than the original version, but they got right to the point. They were in, they were out. Does, a better, fierce solo.
Yeah.
And hats off to them. They pulled it off.
I mean, honest to God, I can't say it more. Ed's guitar work on this album is off the charts. The fact that this is his last, at least, is just a beautiful statement, even though, number one, that he's gone is fucking crushing. Number two, that not only is he gone, but this came out 10 years ago. So, that's the interesting part of the whole thing, which also makes me wonder, Dave, even if Ed was alive and not sick, he never got sick, do you think Van Halen would have continued? Like, I wonder.
I think they would have continued. The question is, what would they have done?
Right.
And how often? Because it seemed like they could never get back into the studio again to agree on a studio album.
I know.
That always seemed to be the challenge. Would they have performed live? Yeah, I think so. I think they still would have played live. Because they were always trying to figure that out, but then Ed was getting sick and they would have to cancel. But I think they would have done something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's interesting because the reason I ask is in 2015 when Dave made that statement on stage, it just made me wonder, like, did he know that this was the end because of Ed's health? Or were they at the end of the road with Roth? I mean, I always kind of wondered about that. Because, I mean, you have to realize Eddie died 5 years after that. That's a while. So,
right. Well, maybe Dave was just thinking this could be the last time we're on stage together, so I'm going to make it count.
Well, the reason why is you remember some of the press surrounding the live album when Ed did that interview with, like, Billboard magazine. He was making those comments, and you're like, I don't think this is going so well. Like, almost like we did the reunion with Roth, we did the album with Roth, we toured for that, now we got this live album. It's almost like you guys wanted us to reunite with Roth, we did. You wanted us to tour, we did. You wanted us to make an album, we did. We never made a live album, here's a live album. Now leave us the fuck alone.
Right, I mean, but I think there would have been something.
I don't know, maybe.
I think there would have been.
Maybe.
I'm not saying a lot. I'm not saying they would have been dishing an album out every year or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I think there would have been some kind of touring, Ed's health notwithstanding. There would have been something.
Yeah.
I mean, they were always doing something every 3 to 4 years.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is, if you remember our interview with John Shanks, and he was telling us it was some hostage negotiation to get that album done. Remember, he was like, it's a miracle that this album got done. Please, everybody who's listening to this, even if you listened to that episode, go re-listen to it because it's interesting in retrospect, even for us. So definitely check that out. Now, the next song is She's the Woman, which originally derived from the song She's the Woman, much like Bullethead. Now, this is the version from A Different Kind of Truth.
the party started. It's looking like the city told my other apartment. She got a doorbell sign that says bring it, don't ring it. She's the woman. She's the woman. She's the woman. She's the woman.
Now here's a clip of the old version of She's the Woman. Now, like Tattoo, the song's bass and groove is there, and the chorus phrasing of the line, she's the woman, that's there. Now, the weird part is, listen to this, here's the breakdown from the old She's the Woman. Now you guys recognize that? That's because it's from Mean Street. Here's a clip from Mean Street.
Dance, baby.
See, right off of Fair Warning. So what Ed did is he took that breakdown and he ended up using it in Fair Warning. So obviously he's not going to reuse it again. So he kind of retooled that. Here's a clip. Now, the lyrics are all brand new, with the exception of the chorus. You know, she's the woman, that kind of all stayed there, and the aggressive guitar attack and drums. But again, the seed is there, but it's definitely a bit more than Down in Flames, because they kept the chorus going 3 times. If she's the woman, she's the woman. Now, this should have been the first single, in my opinion, because I think if the band returned with this, it would have had that VH stamp on it. I mean, the first thing you hear is the attack of Ed and the attack of Al, and it's just like, oh my god, that's so Van Halen. You know what I mean? Like, right in the beginning, the attack is so insane, and it showcases everyone right at the top. Dave's lyrics are fresh with the exception of the chorus, and the new breakdown is great too, and Ed credits Wolf actually with coming up with it, believe it or not. It also has a quick and dirty vibe to it, this song. What do you think of She's the Woman, Dave?
Yeah, I think this one is also pretty loyal to the original version.
Yeah.
But the new version, it definitely swings better. And again, a band with a lot more experience taking a good song and making it better. I thought the new breakdown was interesting because they couldn't use the old one anymore.
Of course.
I thought Wolf did a good job of putting a new breakdown in there. I agree with you in that if you wanted to appeal to the hardcore diehard fans, then you should have released this song first.
Yeah.
You know, but as a single though, I mean, even Van Halen knew that, you know, songs like that aren't necessarily the songs you release as singles. Those are the ones that people dig deep into the album, and those are the ones that they like. You know, something like Girl Gone Bad, for example. Like when Wolf was thinking of songs for, you know, originally calling it the B-sides, this is the kind of song that would fit perfect with that.
I see this as a way more of an upfront rocker in the terms of like And the Cradle Will Rock or Unchained or Panama. It has that very, very Van Halen sound. Like it has.
It does.
You know,
You're right. It does.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily always the songs they'll release as singles. I mean, the songs they're releasing as singles are Jump, Dance the Night Away.
I know. That's where Tattoo comes in. I mean, for sure, that fits in right in there. For sure. Without question.
Right.
Now, I understand. You know what it is? They do these things on paper. That's what it is. They do these things on paper, saying, "Oh, well, this is going to appeal to a triple format play, and we'll get more ads on this." But the bottom line is, Dave, who's buying this shit? It's the diehard fans. It's not.
Yes, that's true. Right.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, the little bugaboo about this album was that it didn't go to number 1. It went to number 2 because of Adele. Adele squashed them.
Right.
She came out, and I think she had that big splash on the Grammys. The week that the album came out, Adele hit the Grammys and made a big splash, and her album went bananas to number 1. And that's when she became a goddamn superstar. And I love Adele. I think she's great. But it blocked Van Halen from going to number 1 because they never had a number 1 album with Roth. Even 1984 was blocked by Thriller. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think Sam, he had a heart on that week. That was for sure. He loved that. That's Sam's favorite thing. Every album I went to number 1. That kind of thing. Anyway, the next song is Beats Workin', and the original one from that was Put Out the Lights. So here's a clip from Beats Workin' from A Different Kind of Truth. Now, here's the old version, the demo of which it stemmed from, Put Out the Lights. Here's a clip. Now, Beats Workin', I'm going to tell you straight out. The first minute has nothing to do at all with the song. It has a whole epic intro that was added on that is brand new and has nothing to do with the demo. Here's a clip. Then Roth comes in, and he gets into this almost bluesy groove here, and the chorus gets more poppy and bright. with Put Out the Lights, there's no epic opener, but the riff and the bluesy groove is there. However, Roth's lyrics are totally, totally different. This is simple. It's sort of a canvas foundation for the song. Ed took the parts he liked, and Roth definitely reworked it. The energy is there, though. The same energy is there. And in the new version, Ed adds a fiercer guitar solo as Alex Van Halen sort of swings in the background. He really swings on this one. And the ending is totally different as well. What do you think of Beats Working, Dave?
I like it better than Put Out the Lights, but in particular for the reason you stated. They took that song and they put on a new intro and a new outro. Well, the intro is classic Van Halen.
Oh, yeah,
I think it's one of the best intros to any song they ever did.
You're talking about the one on A Different Kind of Truth,
is
right?
a great way to close out the whole album. They really picked a good song that way. Again, this is taking a song they had demoed before and fleshing it out and making it sound better. Roth totally reworks the title of the song, new lyrics and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Wolf really makes something with the bass playing on this for the new latter part of the song before Ed does the solo. Really making a song that they had demoed the first time and was okay and making it that much better. So kudos for these guys for really putting in the work and making a better song.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, Out of Space is originally from a song called Let's Get Rockin'. Now, here's a clip of Out of Space from A Different Kind of Truth.
Blast, interstellar facial flow, bumper sticker of a rocket tap. Go home, the earth is
full. Now here's a clip of Let's Get Rockin' from the old recording. Now, the guitar riff is the same for sure, and the bass frame is there. It's just sort of standing in place. But in the Different Kind of Truth version, Roth plays off Ed's kind of stuttered guitar, you know, da-da-da-da, da-da-da. Like, he kind of plays off that riff, and he sings the chorus to it. And the lyrics are totally different. It's clear Ed was taking parts here and reusing them in a different way. But I love the way Roth played off of Ed's riff. What do you think of that, Dave?
Lyrically, I like the song better when they did it the first time.
Oh, okay.
I think if they had kept that lyrical motif of Let's Get Rockin', redid the music the way they did, and opened the album with this song, there you go.
Okay.
I think that would have been perfect.
Glad
I think
you like that as an album opener.
Opening
Okay.
with Let's Get Rockin' is the way to go. Roth takes a whole different approach lyrically. I mean, that's just where he was at this time.
Right.
And it's not bad. I mean, there's almost like a message in his lyrics, which is interesting for a Roth. You don't always find that, but you do this time. So lyrically, I wish they would have stayed with the Let's Get Rockin' motif.
Okay.
Musically, again, it's another demo they had the opportunity to flesh out. And this one is definitely a very rocking song. It's not a punk song. It's just fierce the whole way through.
Yeah. And the last song, Big River, was originally called Big Trouble, not to be confused with the song Big Trouble from David Lee Roth's solo years. So here's a clip of Big River from A Different Kind of Truth.
Wind at my back, facing the sun, all my big ideas done. Big River.
Now here's a clip of Big Trouble from the old days. Now, Big River has this massive, thick stomp to it, and it's got these incredible long notes by Roth, which is not common for Roth, but I think it's interesting. There's also this unbelievable solo from Eddie at about 1 minute and 57 seconds in. Here's a taste of that. Another thing that's kind of weird about this song is it fades out at the end, which is not common for Van Halen, especially in more modern ages, but it did fade out. But Big Trouble, it has kind of the same opening, goes into the same riff, and it's a basic same track, but the chorus called it Big Troubles. It's interesting when he says it, he calls it Big Troubles, but the song is known as Big Trouble, which is interesting. And then there's also another part, the solo's a little bit different too. I think Big Trouble is less impressive, but it does have good bones to it. What do you think of Big Trouble and Big River, Dave?
No, I agree with you. Again, this is why it was a demo, and now that they finally worked on it, they made something better out of it. And I agree with Ed's outro guitar solo on Big River is just amazing. In fact, they actually abbreviated it on A Different Kind of Truth. If you know where to look, there's a version of that song out there with a longer version of the outro solo. If you can't get enough of Ed soloing, and quite frankly, whoever's listening to this podcast, who can't get enough of that?
How much longer is it?
I want to say it's about another 45 seconds of soloing.
Okay. Well, that wraps up A Different Kind of Truth. I really think that everybody should give that a re-listen. If it's an album you bought and, just listen to it a couple times, you have to take this out. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't listen to A Different Kind of Truth, I don't know what you're doing, because there are so many gems on there. And I want to suggest that everybody who listens to it, listen to it with a good pair of headphones, because not everybody does that, but you got to do it sometimes, because you really hear the incredible craftsmanship that was put into this album. There was a lot of work that was put into this album, and we waited a long time for this album. And you know what? It really didn't disappoint. And I really think, Dave, that it did say that it sold about 422,000 at the end of 2012. And I think that might have hit gold by now. That's 10 years later.
Well, it may have in terms of sales. Unfortunately, I don't think it ever got certified.
No, but see, here's the problem. Unless you pay to certify your stuff, you don't really know what you sold. And I don't understand. There's so many bands like that. I mean, I just found out because, obviously we heard that Meatloaf died this week, right? Do you know that Bat Outta Hell sold 43 million copies?
Did it really?
Because they said, like Dark Side of the Moon, it's a catalog record. They also note Hotel California, and they also note Back in Black. It just keeps selling. And the interesting thing about it is it was huge all over the world. So it sold globally huge. Now, we all know, like, Van Halen was very much an American band. You know, they did a little bit in Europe, but they don't have the reputation in Europe that they have here. You know, they don't have that kind of level. Like, AC/DC is an absolute global band. Van Halen is not. I mean, you know, he's respected, and there's plenty of people in Europe who listen to this podcast. Please don't get offended by that. But I'm just saying, like, you know, they never had the biggest sales and big tours in Europe. I don't know why. Personally, I think it was management. That's what it came down to, or laziness. I know it was laziness when Sam was in the band, because, you know, the 5150 tour, they cut it short because they were tired, and then they want to get back, and they had to do Sam's solo album, and then they went right into OU812 because they had to hit the Monsters of Rock tour, and then they had to go out on the OU812 tour. They didn't have the time or the effort or the energy to put in like a whole other European leg, but I don't know. It's interesting. However, this is all we have left. Please, please, please take a re-listen. Every song on it is great. I really do believe that. I think it's enjoyable. Certain ones you'll like better than others, for sure. But the more I listen to this album, the more I love it, and I can't suggest it enough. It really is a spectacular record. And Dave, you have any last parting words on A Different Kind of Truth?
I do want to thank Wolf Van Halen for getting the band back together.
That's right.
And I do want to thank him for getting them to record another album. Like you said, according to John Shanks, it was like pulling teeth. But it got done. Wolf was a huge part of that. And I want to thank Wolf for going back to the original demos and getting the band back in that groove. It worked because they found that magic again. Ed's soloing is just out of this world. Mm-hmm. He's on fire, pun intended.
Right.
Alex is drumming like, you know, he's almost about to fall off the rails. You know, like the picture of the train on the cover of the album. And Roth is singing great lyrically. He's a bit wordy on this album.
Very wordy, but I love the lyrics. He put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, but he definitely did, so they're not throwaways. And Wolf's bass playing, I mean, who expected anything that good from a guy so much younger than the rest of the band? But he really put in his stamp too. So all around great album, and I'm glad that was the last studio album and not Van Halen 3.
That's the truth. And a good call on thanking Wolf, because he is definitely the unsung hero of this album. Very quietly in the background. Did it for his dad, did it for his uncle, but this is something he wanted. He's the one, remember, he's the man who picked up the phone and called Dave. Takes a lot of balls. Especially for a kid. He was a kid when he did it, too. He was literally a kid. We call him a kid all the time. But literally, he was a kid when he did that. He's the one who made the call to Dave. He's the one who reunited the band. He's the one who got Eddie back on track. He's the one who got his uncle and his dad back into recording mode. And he's the one who reunited the spark that is Van Halen. So, God bless him, man. So, kudos to Wolf. And we wish him the best. And do you think Wolf ever plays one of these songs one day, Dave? You know, he always talks about, I don't want to play Panama, but he is connected to these.
I think that's your best likelihood of him playing a Van Halen song.
Like Chinatown or something.
He participated in.
Yeah. By the way, I think their favorite song on this album is Chinatown. They love Chinatown. That's like one of their favorites. It's interesting. But there's a lot of answers here, guys. I hope you enjoyed this special. And we are happy to celebrate the 10th anniversary of A Different Kind of Truth. Definitely a classic, worth to be part of the 6-pack. Now the 7-pack.
Play it loud.
Awesome.
You know, people talk about the partying and the wildness that goes on. I think that is part and parcel of the artistic process. If you subtracted all of the great artists, not that I'm linking up Van Halen with great, who never drank or who never went to excess, you wouldn't have any more art left. That's what kind of poem are you going to get out of a glass of iced tea?
Pick up the new coffee table-sized book, The Decade That Rocked, by legendary rock photographer Mark Weissguy Weiss. This 376-page book has hundreds and hundreds of full-color photos that Weiss shot through the 80s for magazines like Circus, Faces, and Hit Parader. featuring bands like Van Halen, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, Guns N' Roses, Ozzy Osbourne, and more. There's even behind-the-scenes stories to go with these colorful, eye-popping pictures. The Decade That Rocked, a new book by rock photographer Mark Weiss, is available for purchase now. Go to thedecadethatrocked.com, where there are exclusive bundles available with extra prints, t-shirts, and even patches. Inquire about the Van Halen bundle, especially made for Dave and Dave Unchained listeners. Order today. The Decade That Rocked. It'll rock your world.
Need a laugh? Check out the Funny How Comedy Podcast, which focuses on upbeat conversations with legendary comedians. It's free on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out on Facebook at Funny How Comedy Podcast, on Twitter at Funny How Podcast, on Instagram at Funny How Comedy Podcast, or email us at funnyhowcomedypodcast@gmail.com.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Damon Johnson from Brother Kane and Black Star Riders, and you are listening to Dave and Dave Unchained. Crank it up.
Hey folks, I'd like to introduce you to the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast. Welcome to the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast, where no stone is left unturned in the show's epic quest to review and dissect every single rock album ever made. Join self-proclaimed rock authorities Chris Carson and Lee Bowie on their epic journey to uncover the true classics. You can find the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast wherever podcasts can be found, including Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Our website address is classicrockalbumbyalbum.libsyn.com. That's LIBSYN.com. And we can be reached on Facebook at fb.me/Classic Rock Album by Album. See you soon from the Classic Rock Album by Album podcast.
Check out the new podcast, The Rock Quarry, your place to hear in-depth interviews with some of rock's most colorful characters, with your host, entertainment journalist David J. Criblay. The Rock Quarry is available for free on Spreaker and iTunes. You can check us out on Facebook at The Rock Quarry Podcast, on Twitter at Rock Quarry Pod, on Instagram at The Rock Quarry Podcast, or email us at therockquarrypodcast@gmail.com.
Man, I tell you, this kid, we jammed badass tune the other day. He is so creative, it is ridiculous. He's just a natural beyond anyone I've ever met. And this is not his dad talking. I'm talking as a producer, as a musician. He wants to play double kick, okay? So I set him up a week and a half ago. Then he wants a cowbell, okay? So I bring over a cowbell. Anyway, 4 or 5 days go by, and he goes, Dad, let's jam. It's like he's been playing double kick all his damn life. And don't forget, he only started making music when he was 10. And he's only 12. He plays bass better than a lot of people I know. I started making music when I was 6, playing piano, okay? But I didn't start rock and roll or playing guitar or drums till I was 12. By 14, I wasn't like him. And he doesn't practice. He just started. He goes, Daddy, I've been practicing. I go, yeah, all right. I gave him 4 guitar lessons, and he played in front of his whole school flawlessly. And he only practiced for an hour. And he's never played guitar before. 4 lessons. Now, drums, I just recorded it on one of those little Radio Shack micro-cassette things. I played it for Alex yesterday. Because Alex and I, we play every day. We jam, and write and whatever. I played it for Al. He's going, my God, I can't believe it. He's just born with it,
Ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 incredible guests this evening, and it is not two guys. This is usually a sausage fest here, but we have two lovely ladies on the podcast, which is always a special evening for us because there's not a lot of feminine energy on this podcast, but we love to have ladies come on, and these are two very special ladies because they are Julie Kimura and also Randa Schmalfeld, and they are the ones who make up Pasadena for Van Halen, and they are the ones that got the Eddie Van Halen plaque established in Pasadena. I want to welcome you two to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Awesome. It's great to have you guys on. And so wanted to start off, if you could let our listeners know what Pasadena for Van Halen is and how did it form?
Well, do you want to answer that, Julie, or should I?
Sure. It formed when Eddie unfortunately passed away, and there was just so much talk amongst the neighbors who lived here about how, of course, they loved him and they shared their memories of when they were growing up in Pasadena and attended these raucous backyard parties and how it really shaped their lives and, of course, how affected everybody was by his passing. And I happened to make a comment that it would be great if Pasadena renamed an alley after him because his childhood home was right next to an alley. And a lot of people really liked that idea. And so Randa said that she would do it with me if I wanted to, which was the only way I was going to try to do this is with Randa. So that's how it started.
And how do you guys know each other?
We know each other from a Pasadena book club. We became friends through a ladies' book club.
Ah, okay, great. Excellent. That's awesome.
Also, I want to add, after Eddie's passing, we both lived just a few blocks from where Eddie and Alex grew up. And we saw these roadside memorials, one that was just huge along a pretty busy street, and then another one in front of their childhood home. And it was a beautiful thing. People were leaving guitars and flowers and just all kinds of mementos, maybe even from their days of knowing Van Halen. But one of the things that I saw when I was over there is people were like backing up into the street to take a picture of this whole roadside memorial, and cars were screeching to a halt in the street, and it just seemed so crazy. And I think that both Julie and I felt like that our city needed to do something to commemorate Eddie Van Halen and provide some kind of a permanent place where fans could go, you know. And so that's kind of what got us started with all of this.
Gotcha. Now, did you both grow up in Pasadena, or are you just currently living there now?
I live here now, and I've lived here for about 2.5 years. And I grew up in Fullerton in North Orange County. So I graduated from high school in 1976, and I was part of that backyard party scene, you know, back in the day. And I have some high school friends who had seen Van Halen play. If I saw them, I think I would have remembered it.
Right. Of course.
Now, do your friends agree that the legend of Van Halen backyard parties actually lives up to the legend?
Yes. Oh, sorry, I spoke for Randa, but I know that that's a big yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was pretty crazy, even with like lesser known bands, you know, just locally, they would always get raided by helicopters and have tons of police breaking up the party, especially if it was a good band, right?
Sure. And Randa, did you grow up in Pasadena?
No, I grew up in North Orange County.
Oh, okay. All right. So tell me, in terms of your Van Halen fandom, tell me about how you feel about Van Halen. Were you big fans of the band before you put together Pasadena for Van Halen, or what's your passion for the band?
Oh my gosh, Julie, you have to tell them your story.
Okay. Yes, we both were fans of Van Halen before we moved to Pasadena, for sure. And I actually went to my first concert, which was Van Halen in the early 80s. My brother took me, and it was at the Forum in Los Angeles. And I was about 14 or 15. And, of course, I'd been a fan even before I went to that concert. But Van Halen was my brother's all-time favorite band. And it was just something that was so nice of him to share with me because, of course, you know, I'm his annoying little sister. But it's just something that tied us together in addition to loving them on our own.
Oh, wow. That's great. Do you remember what tour you saw them on?
No, it was in the early 80s. I was pretty young.
Oh, really? You were really young, huh?
So you were like 14 or 15 and you went to a Van Halen concert?
Yes.
How did you convince your parents to do that?
I am really surprised that it worked, but it did. And it was an eye-opener for me, but, you know, I loved it.
That's great. That's great. What about you, Randa?
Well, I loved them as soon as I heard their first album. You know, Running with the Devil, like that guitar solo just did it for me. And even to this day, like lifts my spirits whenever I hear it. I became a teacher in 1984, believe it or not. My husband used to play Hot for Teacher for me every Friday night as I was coming in the driveway.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
That's great. That's great. Now, how would you describe Pasadena for our listeners who haven't been there? We've all read about Pasadena. We don't really know what it's like. A lot of us haven't been there. How would you describe its character, its size, its economic status, its population? How would you characterize the area?
Well, I guess I would describe us as a really diverse community. We're home to Caltech University and also to JPL, and NASA has a presence here. So it's the Rose Bowl, the Rose Parade. So there's a real community pride here within our city, I feel. And I really feel like that Eddie Van Halen kind of maybe picked up on all of that tinkering and innovation that was going on here in our city. He was really famous for what he did with his guitars and modifying them and changing them and adding different pickups and all of that. And I just feel like that Pasadena is really proud to be the home of Van Halen.
Excellent. That's great. And is Pasadena considered a town, a village, a city, a hamlet? What would you call it?
Yeah, definitely a city.
It's a city. Okay. So now, would you say that Pasadena is very proud of being part of Van Halen history? Is it something that's present in the town?
I feel that way, don't you, Julie?
I mean, I do as far as the residents go, but I would really like to see the city leaders do more to recognize that the people want more acknowledgement for Van Halen here in the city.
Sure.
Why do you think the leaders... I sense that there's a hesitancy or a lack of initiative or interest in the city leaders in doing something. And why do you think that is?
Well, I don't think that there's a lack of interest. They all seem to be on board, and they get giant smiles whenever Van Halen is brought up. It brings them back to their youth, many of them. So it's a little perplexing why we can't get more accomplished, but we're still working on it, most definitely.
Okay.
I think that they're just being super cautious and careful and want to make sure that they, get buy-in from all their stakeholders. And I know the whole process of doing this plaque took us over a year. And, I think Julie and I just thought that it could happen right away. But I think one of the things that I've learned from this experience is that doing anything through the city seems to take a really long time.
Tell us about the plaque that you got established. What exactly is it? Where is it? Who got it done for you? Tell us about the process to get it done.
Sure. Well, we started a GoFundMe. We initially had wanted to raise funds for an alley to be renamed. And Julie spoke with our city council person and heard that there was a fee of a $3,000 application fee. So neither of us really wanted to put in $3,000 for something we weren't even positive was going to happen. So we decided to do a GoFundMe and get more people involved and get more, public input. And so we also established this name Pasadena for Van Halen. We got social media together, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And I had a little bit of experience with putting things out on social media as a way of garnering support. And so I just started posting, and gosh, Julie, within the first weekend, we had $5,000. Am I right?
Yes.
I mean, it was just incredible.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what do you attribute to that level of support and so quickly?
Well, I'll tell you guys, it was really just so heartwarming because these donations were trickling in from not only Pasadena, but from all over the country and around the world. And most of them were in like $10 and $20 donations. So it was a lot of people who donated in small increments. We had some large donors, definitely some really generous people, and everybody gave what they could. And I think it's because everybody wants to see something great happen for Eddie.
Okay, sure. Where did they put the plaque exactly? Who did it for you? And when did it happen?
So the plaque was installed at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. And this is a venue where Van Halen played 14 times between 1977 and early 1979. So it's an important place here in Pasadena in Van Halen history. And I went over there and met with the CEO of the Pasadena Operating Company and also with a representative from the city manager's office. And I was thinking that they were going to put it like on a block wall off to the side or something, but the CEO, Mike Ross, said, no way, we want to put it right here. And it's like very prominent right on the front of the building. And there's nothing else commemorating anybody else anywhere near that plaque. So it really feels really special. And they asked me what I thought that the wording should be, and I kind of gave a stab at it. And then they took that back to the Van Halen team. And I know that they were working with Irving Azoff and some of the representation from, I believe Alex maybe had buy-in, and also Wolfgang on the wording for the plaque. We also got to use the Van Halen logo, which we were really excited about.
That's cool. And so did the band or anybody from the family recognize the acknowledgement, or did you hear from anybody? Or
we haven't heard from anybody directly. It was during the midst of COVID, so like everything else, it was like a really small and quiet unveiling with only the city council people and the mayor, and then I think a couple members of the press were there. So none of the Van Halens were there, though. We hope they like it.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Do you think this will open up future projects in the town recognizing Van Halen?
Ooh, absolutely. Julie, do you want to tell them about the park?
Okay, so there's a new park that's being developed in the city, and there was a naming contest for the park, and Eddie Van Halen's name was submitted. People voted really strongly for Eddie Van Halen, and he got the majority of the votes. And so the Parks and Recreation Committee actually decided to pick a different name, despite Eddie getting the majority of the votes.
Oh,
but it's not over.
Okay.
Yeah, the recommendation from the Parks and Rec Committee is going to the City Council, and the City Council will be the group that has the ultimate decision. And we're trying to influence them and get the residents of Pasadena to reach out to their members and the city clerk to let them know that they really want it to be named after Eddie Van Halen. Mm-hmm. And if it happens, we would love to see a statue erected in that park.
Yeah,
wow,
that sounds amazing.
Great.
That would be great. What name are they trying to get put past instead of Eddie?
Octavia E. Butler.
Okay, and who is that?
She is a science fiction writer and lived here in Pasadena. I will say that Eddie Van Halen Park got 93% of the votes.
Whoa.
So we were shocked when they didn't go with Eddie Van Halen Park.
Wow.
But we feel like that we've got a pretty good chance of having that recommendation rejected. I hope so.
Wow. So what can our listeners do to help the case?
Well, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can email us at pasadenaforvanhalen@gmail.com. You can donate to our cause at Pasadena for Van Halen GoFundMe. Mm-hmm. If everybody donates $10, that's going to help us a lot in getting towards our goal of having this statue erected in Eddie Van Halen Park. And more immediately, we really need some support in reaching out to City Council. And so we're just asking that if your listeners can reach out to City Council, that would be awesome. And I can give you an email address of the city clerk that maybe you could publish for us.
Sure, of course. That's great.
Are they going to listen to anybody who lives outside of Pasadena?
Well, Pasadena is kind of an internationally known city, so I think it only follows that people from around the world would be interested in what happens here, especially as it pertains to Eddie Van Halen and Van Halen. So I don't think there's anything wrong with them hearing from people from all over the place. I actually heard from a guy from the Netherlands today who is writing to them. So we know that we've got fans all over the world, so why not, maximize that?
If you promise to paint the swing set red and name it after Sammy Hagar, he'll push it through.
That's a good question. Where do you guys stand on the different eras of Van Halen? Are you fans of just the original era with David Lee Roth, or do you like all the eras?
I love the old stuff, but I really love all of it, and I listen to all of it. Okay. How about you, Julie?
Yeah, same. I love it all.
Okay, excellent. That's great. Do you guys have a favorite album or favorite song by Van Halen?
Well, I like that Hot for Teacher song.
Ah, obviously.
Is that your favorite?
Obviously. You got personal ties to that one.
Right. I can't imagine why.
That's cool. And what about you?
I really, really, really love And the Cradle Will Rock. If I had to pick one, that would be it.
Okay, excellent. That's great. Now, I heard rumors of some sort of mural. Are you working on that as well?
Unfortunately, that's kind of on the back burner right now, and we're not really sure what's going to happen with it. We had reached out to Pasadena High School, and I had great meetings with them, and they had even shown us a wall that was very prominent, facing right out onto the parking lot where the Rose Parade floats are parked after the parade. Then in August of this year, or of last year, the principal emailed me and said he was just feeling too overwhelmed with school and COVID and all of it, and that he just didn't feel he could put his time and energy into it. So I gave it about a month, and then I reached out to the school district, and they seemed like that they wanted to do it, and we were kind of moving along. And then all of a sudden they wanted to move the mural to be on an interior wall of the campus where our donors couldn't even see it. You know, we have offered to pay for lettering to be posted on the exterior of the building. They had talked about naming their building after Edward Van Halen. And so we've offered to do that, but I haven't heard back from them.
Okay.
So the ball's kind of in their court right now.
Okay.
Do you ever worry that at some point the town, whether it's the government or the people, will feel like there's an oversaturation? Like before there wasn't anything, and now there's a plaque at the Pasadena Civic. There'll be a park named after Ed, and now the wall of the high school is going to have a mural of him, and the school might be named after him. You know, before you know it, you know, the town's going to be named after him. People are afraid it's going to be too much of a good thing.
No, because not all of those things will be accomplished by us. We're just trying to get some of those things accomplished, and whichever comes first is what we will put our attention to. And the school actually wouldn't have been named after Eddie Van Halen. It's just a building in the school.
Gotcha.
The school
Gotcha.
I think it's great what you're doing. Do you feel like Ed's passing will deepen the band's status in rock history, or do you think it'll make it fade? What do you think?
I think it'll deepen it. They're already legends. They will be remembered forever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do too. And we know that album sales just jumped, you know, so far after his passing. I heard that Van Halen was one of the top selling artists of 2020. So I feel that more and more people and young people are learning more about them. And I think that's another reason that we really want to see this park happen and the statue happen. And we'd really even like for there to be some sort of a component where kids can come and learn who he was. 100 years from now, I want people to be able to hear Eddie Van Halen playing Eruption.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's obviously the goal. It might make sense at some point in Pasadena, if they could, and if the family would work with you guys, put up some sort of, you know, little museum or something, you know, because obviously there's a lot of stuff that could be displayed for Ed. In fact, some of his guitars and different things, equipment, different amps and things like that have been displayed in prominent museums, including like the Smithsonian. So, you know, especially at a birthplace in Pasadena, that might make sense going forward. Just out of curiosity, are there any specific locales in Pasadena or that are very Van Halen related? Obviously, you know, you talked about the Civic Auditorium there. Are there any other places that are kind of Van Halen centric?
Well, what would you say, Julie? I think this area where we live is very Van Halen centric, you know.
It is, yeah, next to his childhood home. And also this is kind of funny, but the little corner liquor store that Eddie and Alex used to walk down to routinely.
Wow.
And they etched their initials in the cement, which is still there.
Wow.
That's kind of a hub that people like to visit.
Yeah, and what is the name of that liquor store?
I don't know.
Where's it located?
It's on the corner of Allen and Billis Street in Northeast Pasadena. Back in the day, that was supposed to be kind of party central. This was before, you know, the days of cell phones and stuff. And if kids weren't sure where the parties were, I heard that the liquor store owner could always direct them to the right place.
Oh, wow.
Well, because everybody was coming in that weekend to buy liquor for the party, right?
Right,
So-
exactly.
Right, right. That makes sense.
All those underage kids.
I'm sure they all had legitimate ID. Do a lot of people come to the Van Halen house where the brothers grew up with their parents and check that out?
Yeah, absolutely. I walk by there probably once a week because it's just about 3 or 4 blocks from our house. And the other day when I was by there, there were a bunch of candles that had been lit on the wall that is in front of the house. And I often see flowers out there. I have been in touch with the homeowner there, and we have talked with him about placing a plaque on that wall in front of the house. And he's really interested in doing that, but we need to work through getting permission from the Van Halen family. He actually went to school with David Lee Roth, and he bought that property from Eugenia Van Halen.
Wow.
Like in 1986. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Oh, wow. So he's owned the house since. Oh, wow. Okay.
That's the place to put the museum right there.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
Have you guys considered making Pasadena for Van Halen merch?
Oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about that. Have you, Julie?
No, but we do need to come up with some kind of creative idea for donations if we get to the point where we can erect a statue.
Yeah,
because that would be costly.
that might be fun. It's just to show support. And everybody should know Pasadena for Van Halen is the number 4. So Pasadena for Van Halen. That's great. So now, in terms of going forward, how long do you guys want to keep this up? Is this something you're going to be doing for a while? Is this just a short-term thing, or how would you describe it?
Well, I think that I would like to see us, first of all, establish this park and absolutely get a statue. I know a lot of people are hoping that a statue can be erected. And, you know, there's really a rich tradition of cities around the world honoring their beloved musicians with statues. So I think that it's really the right thing to do here in Pasadena. There are lots of other venues, and like they used to play at a park and do impromptu shows not too far from here. It would be cool to have plaques in lots of different places, but I don't know if Julie and I are the ones that are going to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see what happens with that. And hopefully, you know, this park, obviously you have some momentum with this park situation. That would be good. Did they give you sort of any answer as to how someone can garner 93% of the vote and then not going in that direction? Did they give you any answer for that?
Well, I've spoken with one of our city council members, and I have some meetings coming up this next week. And, you know, I think we just have to convince them that the Recreation and Parks Commission didn't follow the will of the people by going with this other name. And Octavia Butler is like an extraordinary author and really does deserve recognition. And it's our recommendation that Pasadena name our central library, which is undergoing some pretty significant renovation right now after her once that building is completed. So I'm floating that idea with the city. We'll see how it goes.
I think that's a really smart move. Because,
it is. And if you want to get people riled up, just tell them the vote was stolen.
It was unjust.
Right. And there you go. That'll, you know, they'll be all put the marching in the streets. So
you guys are awesome.
They'll be charging through the city hall there with VH t-shirts blaring "Hot for Teacher."
Right. And, you know, they'll be spray painting red, black, and white stripes all over everywhere. It'll be great.
Or you could say, listen, either change the park name or the backyard parties will resume.
There you go.
There you go.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Well, listen, it has been a pleasure talking with you. I want to thank you so much for your time. I wish you the best of luck on your crusade. We are in full support of Pasadena for Van Halen. Do us a favor, say your socials so everybody knows what your socials are.
We're at Pasadena for Van Halen on all social media. So Pasadena for Van Halen, all one word with the number 4 in the middle. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. That's also our email address as well.
And have you gotten in contact with one David Lee Roth who lives in Pasadena? You know where he lives?
We do. We should go there.
Well,
I'm pretty sure he's got to be aware of our efforts.
Well, you know what? He's the guy to speak to because Sammy and Mike are off on the islands over there playing. Alex likes to hide away, and so does Wolfgang. David Lee Roth might be your guy to knock on the door. He's probably pretty receptive. Maybe that avenue might be one to try to knock on somebody's door or at least get some recognition there for sure.
Right.
Well,
because he's not playing in Vegas now.
Yeah, that's right.
And, you know, if you promise to hang up one of his paintings somewhere, that might help your cause.
That's right.
Good idea. It's his artwork.
That's
I
right.
think he's pretty talented. Julie, how about you and I go over there and we'll report back to you guys?
Please do. In fact, report.
The password to the gate is homala babala zebala bubala homala babala zebala.
That's right. And you know what? What you should do is go on TikTok, dance to Hot for Teacher in front of the gates. That'll get you in.
That's a good idea.
Right. Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much. If there's anything we can do to help you guys, you just let us know.
Oh my gosh, thank you. What a pleasure it is to talk to you guys. Thank you so much for inviting us on.
Oh, absolutely. It's our pleasure.
Thank you for coming on. We were so excited and curious to hear how this thing was going and how it started. As fans, we just think it's awesome that you've got this grassroots things going on and you're trying to get the recognition that Eddie deserves in his hometown. Because there's not a lot of legacy things going on for Van Halen, by Van Halen. So we love the fact, if you know the history of the band, you wouldn't be so shocked. To be fair, Eddie himself was never a look-back kind of guy.
I just meant that there's not a lot of recognition in general, especially in this area. Biggest thing that we have here is the mural at the Guitar Center in Hollywood.
Yeah, that's the truth. But, Eddie was a low-key dude. He was not one to trump himself up. He did what he did, and he used to stand by his music. He used to say, I'm a musician, not a rock star. That was sort of his mantra. You know what? I think it's important that the fans are the ones who secure the legacy for the band, because the band definitely won't do it for themselves. But it's still very deserving. And like Dave said, the history is that they really don't curate their own legacy, which is fine, but they still are deserving. So therefore, your efforts are certainly warranted. So that's important.
I have to tell you guys that when we participated in the plaque unveiling, that everybody there who was there representing the city was so proud. And I spoke with the chief of police and I said something like, I heard that those parties were pretty crazy and I wasn't even sure if you would be a Van Halen fan. He was like, are you kidding? I love Van Halen. I went to every concert I could go to. And our mayor even talked about serving them Mexican food late at night after they would get done with their gigs.
Oh, wow.
Stuff. So there's just so much pride here in this city.
That's cool.
I really hope that plaque is the first of a couple of great things that we do for Eddie Van Halen.
Oh, that's great.
Keep up the great work, ladies.
Absolutely.
We're so excited for you and proud of you, and we're behind you 100%.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, you guys.
You got it.
Whoa! How about that for rock video music fans? Live all day, all night. You know what you need. Only right here on Dave TV.
Check us out on Facebook at Dave and Dave Unchained, a Van Halen podcast, on Twitter at DD Unchained, on Instagram at DD Unchained Podcast, and you can email us at ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com.